Please take your seats. The meeting is about to begin. Please stand by. We are going on air in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon and welcome to the June 10th meeting of the Land Use and Sustainability Committee. Mr. Director, let's do a roll call to establish quorum.
Okay. Commissioner Bott.
Here.
Commissioner Dominguez.
Here.
Commissioner Suarez. Here. And Commissioner Fernandez.
Present, and let the record reflect that Commissioner Joseph Magazine is also in attendance. Today's meeting of the Land Use and Sustainability Committee will be conducted in a hybrid format with members of the committee physically present in the commission chambers at the Miami Beach City Hall and staff and members of the public appearing either in person or virtually via Zoom. To participate virtually, members of the public may dial 888-475-4499 and enter the webinar ID, which is 8505-9923-037#, or log into the Zoom app and enter the webinar ID, which again is 8505-9923-037. Anyone wishing to speak on an item must click the raise hand icon in the Zoom app or dial *9 if participating by phone. With that, Mr. Director, are there any changes to the printed agenda?
There is one change, Mr. Chair, just an announcement. Previously printed as item number 19, this is a discussion on the proposed ordinance establishing the Century and Ferry Lane overlay on Belle Isle. This has been deferred to a future date, and that's the only change.
Thank you. Colleagues, I'm going to be taking the agenda as printed, priority items followed. Then I'm going to take item number 22, which is the 40th Street overlay, out of order. I'm going to take that after the priority items and then go into the regular agenda. With that, is there a motion to set the agenda?
I move.
It's been moved by Commissioner Dominguez,
I'll second.
second by the Vice Chair. And by acclamation, we can show the agenda as adopted. With that, Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 1.
Okay, item number 1 is proposed amendments to the land development regulations to incentivize non-transient residential uses along Washington Avenue from 5th to 17th Streets.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to recognize Commissioner Suarez. Commissioner Suarez, this is your item. You're welcome to introduce your item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've had a lot of issues with Washington Avenue, and it unfortunately isn't what it used to be from 20 years ago. And we dedicate a tremendous amount of police resources, code resources to the area that have negatively affected our quality of life as residents on Miami Beach. And the way I believe the best way to move forward on Washington Avenue is to incentivize residential development. You know, one of the top issues of the campaign trail was affordable housing, making available to people who work in Miami Beach to live in Miami Beach. And specifically to not have to drive to Miami Beach. The intent of my ordinance is to allow and incentivize development that adds to workforce housing and reduces traffic. And so the misconception is if you continue to build and overdevelopment, there's going to add more traffic. The way I've crafted this ordinance with staff is that there is a very limited number of parking where we actually prohibit parking greatly. And the idea is if you work in Miami Beach, you can afford one of these units. And these units are designed not to be super luxury units. In fact, I'll let Tom speak on it soon, that I've actually put a cap on the maximum square foot allowed as far as the units are concerned. But more importantly, we're going to restrict parking to a certain percentage. And right now, I have it at 20%. I don't know how my colleagues feel about that. And I want to incentivize even further for additional workforce housing with possibly 2 extra floors. And the carrot would be 0 parking there would be, you would not be allowed to have parking for the development. And so, Tom, if you could read some of the finer details of the plan, that'd be great.
Sure. And through the chair, as noted in the Land Use Committee memo, in discussions with the item sponsor, we came up with some criteria. The criteria that we've come up with to incentivize the residential units would be based upon the following. These would have to be projects that consisted solely of non-transient residential apartment units. So the development could not include apartments rented on a short-term basis or any other type of transient use. No residential unit would be able to exceed 1,200 square feet in size, and there would be a minimum micromobility component within the interior of the structure that will be accessible by all residents of the building. In terms of the incentives that would apply to these types of projects, the first would be that Washington Avenue is located in parking tier 2C. And the requirements for parking tier 2C, which currently require a minimum of at least 1.5 parking spaces up to 2 parking spaces per unit, that minimum parking requirement would be eliminated. And a cap on the number of off-street parking spaces that may be provided within an eligible project would be established for discussion purposes, 20%. So 20% of the current requirement is the max that could be provided if parking was opted to be provided. Next, the maximum FAR would be increased from the current 2.0 to 3.0. The interior portions of the project that are dedicated to micromobility would be exempt from the definition of floor area. The maximum building height for non-transient buildings or residential buildings would be increased from the current height limit of 50 feet to 75 feet, and the current maximum height for hotels would be decreased from the current 75 feet to 50 feet. Additionally, up to 25 more feet in building height could be permitted if the project did the following. One, did not provide any off-street parking at all. So off-street parking would be prohibited if you want to go above 75 feet. And number two, the project would have to exceed the maximum micromobility requirements as well as participate in a public micromobility network. There would also be a reduction or elimination of the mobility fee, and there would be a sunset provision for these incentives of 7 to 10 years. Finally, there would be an enhanced and expedited process for the permitting of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Director.
And through the chair.
Yes.
So just so everyone is aware, right now, hotels can build up to 75 feet and residential buildings can only build up to 50 feet. So I've flipped that from 50 to 75, and I want to further incentivize development for an additional 25 feet if they remove all parking. So basically, everyone who's going to be living there will not have a car. And also the micromobility fee. And when Tom said a micromobility station, if you can think of like a Deco bike station, but inside the unit, so that they can provide plenty of micromobile options inside the development. That's sort of the goal here, is to really take people off the streets and either walking or bike riding or scooting or you name it. You know, Miami Beach has 2,200 employees. If maybe like a fifth of those employees want to live in Miami Beach, you know, Washington Avenue would be a perfect place to be able to walk to work and live. And the way I've designed it is so that it's not uber luxury. that is going to be built. It's really going to be similar to like the first unit that I bought in, I think, 2008. It was less than 200,000. It was a 550 square foot, one bedroom or studio, and it was a great starting point. Unfortunately, we don't see those anymore being built because the market right now is, yeah, there's challenges. And so, I'm hoping to see what my colleagues see
Thank
about
you.
this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there comments from the dais on this item?
Want to hear what everybody says?
Commissioner Dominguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. I love where this is going. It's so important to try to get more people to live here, that work here. And I'll tell you some of the things, ideas or suggestions that come to mind that may help with the item. First is, I wouldn't be in favor of zero parking, because I would imagine that if there's an air conditioning repairman, if the building has a front desk, really, is every single person not going to have a car? So to have a minimum number of spots, especially for people that are going to fix stuff in the building, is important, because if not, there's nowhere to go. I find that on Belle Isle. Some buildings have parking for those types of needs and others don't, and it's a problem. And then for the height, perfect. I think that's excellent. I think it's needed. And then right now, Washington Avenue is a commercial corridor. I would want to make sure, and I'm sorry, I don't have the backup thing with me, you may have done this already, but make sure that you're talking to the Washington Avenue bid and the people that are stakeholders there now to see their interest. And if a building is knocked down and it's brought brand new, I think having setbacks is important. If you look at areas like Coral Gables, they've respected the setbacks and it looks beautiful when they've done the height. And it's less imposing. And so that would be an idea that if the committee, the body feels is important, they can consider that too for any new builds. But great, important, and thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Dominguez. Vice Chair Bott.
Yeah, thank you. So, Tom, this actually is a question for you. The interior portions of a project dedicated to micromobility being exempt from floor area calculations, what is the biggest impact that could conceivably have? What I'm trying to get at is, we don't want to all of a sudden go up to, 100 feet because they have so much micromobility storage and, chargers for scooters, et cetera, et cetera.
As proposed, I believe the concept primarily would apply to the first floor, and it's done to encourage more of the area of the first floor to be used for this component. What it would do from a practical standpoint is it would allow what would have normally counted as floor area to be used elsewhere in the building, which could increase the size of the building. And it's being proposed in order to incentivize that type of use. If there was a concern about the entire building becoming saturated with that, there could certainly be a cap on the amount of area that could be excluded from FAR, such as limiting the non-FAR area to the first floor to ensure that it wouldn't be extended higher than that.
So, understanding that that's what the intent is, if the entire first floor is used for micromobility purposes, it could then go up an additional floor because they've given over the first floor to essentially parking for different vehicles.
Correct.
So maybe something, we should look at some kind of cap to just make sure that all of a sudden we don't get high rises because they're like, look, we have 2 stories of parking and, deco bikes or whatever in the building. I've just seen where people, you give somebody an inch and they take 3 or 4 miles, so I don't want to give that opportunity. What, if anything, would this do to projects that are already in some kind of state of play on Washington Avenue?
The biggest impact that the proposal would have on existing developments would be on hotels. And if you are a hotel that has already received a land use board approval or a permit or built at 75 feet, it would not affect you. And in my discussions with Nick Hilargis, we've talked about how if this is to move forward, that we can craft the ordinance in a way that those recently completed projects that were based upon the current code would not become legal nonconforming and could remain.
Are there any projects that are in process that fit that description, or is everything pre-approval still?
There is one hotel project that is currently pending at the Historic Preservation Board and the Planning Board in the 1500 block of Washington Avenue, and that's the only project that I'm aware of that could be potentially impacted by this ordinance.
So if this moves forward, that project would have to either get some kind of variance or.
They
or
would
have
likely need to seek an applicability clause, or they could potentially be required to seek a code amendment because you cannot get more than a 3-foot height variance.
Or they would have to reconfigure their project to conform.
Correct, or they would have to lower the height of the project to not exceed 50 feet.
Okay. The last point I would make, so look, I've been asking questions, but I haven't said that I think this is great. I mean, I think a lot of us have talked over the course of the campaign year about making Washington Avenue, really reconfiguring it as a residential corridor that is, you know, young single employees or young families who are 3 blocks from the beach and a couple blocks from an elementary school would really change the tenor of what happens on Washington. So I think this is great. I would also, I don't know if the place for it is here, but since I know some of our colleagues are in the audience, a lot of us have been working on micro-mobility challenges in terms of getting from point A to point B in the city. And I know Washington Avenue was reconfigured to try to make it more bike-friendly, and that was pretty much an unmitigated disaster despite best intentions because residents and drivers couldn't work their way around it. But, you know, if this is going to be something that we're going to do, the complementary part of this will have to be making sure that Washington is worked, you know, prioritized so that there are safe ways to get from South Beach up to North Beach and back. And even if it's not necessarily on the map right now showing where we have safe micro-mobility options, it's going to need to be a matter of priority going forward so that, you know, we don't set people up for incidents because we don't want to do that. But otherwise, I think this is super.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I'm going to go ahead and offer my comments. I think this is certainly the direction we need to be going in order to see the transition from a more intense hotel nightlife use to transition into increasing our full-time residential inventory. And so this advances our collective goals in that direction. And I think it certainly is wise, the transfer of this height from transient uses to non-transient uses, especially when we consider the elimination of the off-street parking. I think it's smart, and there's not all areas of our city are good for this. Mr. Director, let me ask you, as part of our Washington Avenue master plans, what considerations do we have for public transportation as part of the vision of the future of Washington Avenue?
Washington Avenue has always been looked at as one of the primary north-south corridors along with Alton Road. And in the past, we have studied dedicated bus lanes, both in the middle where the median is, as well as on the side. Those bus lanes were discussed and studied independently, as well as part of any potential regional transit connector from the mainland along Fifth Street.
And I think it's, as part of this conversation, we're going to have to then engage in the conversation. How do we advance those dedicated bus lanes? Because if we are looking to increase the population along the extent of Washington Avenue in this magnitude without increasing or providing for parking, we do need to provide an alternate mode of transportation independent of micro-mobility. Not everyone is going to rely on micro-mobility. Mr. Director, let me ask you, do we have unused FAR on Washington Avenue at the moment?
Yes, there are a number of properties that are not maxed out on their maximum allowable floor area ratio.
Is there a way that we could potentially use unused FAR to support the goals that are intended within the very good policy change here? Because what I don't want us to see is a broad sweeping increase of FAR on Washington Avenue that could result in an over-intensification of the street. Do we have the ability of moving off unused FAR between properties?
Yes, in the Resiliency Code, a framework was created for a transfer of development rights program, or it's TDR. And basically what it does is it establishes a framework for the commission to decide on a case-by-case basis when they want to identify transfer districts, which would be areas of the city that the property owners would be allowed to transfer available intensity or FAR, and then receiving districts, which would be those properties that could receive the additional FAR from a transfer district.
Because to the extent possible, what I would like us to see is to not over-intensify Washington Avenue. What I would like us to challenge ourselves, see if the possibility is there, is to move existing unused FAR for properties to be able to contribute to sell their FARs to receiving areas so that we can accommodate the end goal and the objective of increasing the residential, and now provide a mechanism through which now property owners can sell that FAR to receiving property owners and reinvest that money into the upkeep of their properties. And in essence, you're helping create now the density, which is one of the great things that I think that this ordinance does. It creates density in Washington Avenue to help support the economy in Washington Avenue and improve the caliber of the commercial, the restaurant, the retail, the entertainment corridor that we've seen there. So that's the feedback I would offer on this. Commissioner Suarez.
Thank you, everyone. Points all well taken. I guess let me start in reverse order. I think if you really want to incentivize workforce housing and residential development, I want to make it as straightforward as possible for developers to bite on this project because it's very well needed. You made a point about the micromobility and transportation. In reality, that's what I'm hoping this development does target is people who are going to use micromobility and not necessarily a bus for public transportation, but just their own 2 feet or wheelchair or scooter or bike and walk to work. I mean, this is more geared toward, your chef at a swanky restaurant or possibly a school teacher who's working at Feinberg Fisher or Senior Beach High, and they can get on a bicycle and get to work in 5-10 minutes. I don't particularly think we need to change the median on Washington to accommodate a bus route, but I think that's certainly if it gets to that point, I think that's it's doable. And as far as I think Commissioner Bott brought up the micromobility FAR. I'm certainly open to obviously having a cap on that. I mean, what I envision is like a city bike, but inside for every resident to use. And it's not necessarily owned by them, but it's common. I guess it's a common element of the community that you use and share. But totally open to making a cap on that. And yeah, I'd like to move this to, I guess, to the commission to discuss further.
And what I like about this, colleague, is at the moment, we already have an incentive for residential and hotel development. At the moment, this body is looking at doing away with the incentive for the hotel development aspect of it. And in essence, what we're doing is that we are extending the incentive that we already have for residential, but being forward-thinking about it. And I commend you for that. At this time, I'm going to open up the floor to members of the public wishing to speak on this item. Are there members of the public present wishing to speak on this item? And if you wish to speak via Zoom, please raise your hand on Zoom. Welcome, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Commissioners. Daniel Serraldo with Miami Design Preservation League. I remember when there was a Washington Avenue master plan and Ziskovich had been hired to review different alternatives. There was a proposal for like 100 feet, and I believe the feedback was it was a little bit incompatible. But definitely through this process, if it's possible, it'd be good to see renderings of what things might look like built out. And that will give us some more information about this. In addition, my only other concern would be if there's a possibility for this to be used later by the state to say anything within a mile, would this apply to Ocean Drive, which I know none of us want. So hopefully there can be some guardrails in place, and I look forward to following the development of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public attending in person wishing to speak on this item? On Zoom, I see Johan has his hand raised. Johan, welcome. You're recognized.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner. My worries are about, size or scale, but from two different angles. Given that my neighborhood is involved in attempting to limit height between 5th and 6th Streets, I fear that 100-foot or even 75-foot buildings along Washington, certainly if not very carefully chosen, may, at a minimum, cast shadows. I know there is no legal right to either a view or what have you, but nonetheless, or even intrude in the way of noise, possibly into the neighborhood. My other concern, though, is about the limitation on the size. And I'm wondering if the commissioners would think, as you move forward, a little more about exactly whom we're trying to attract to this type of unit. And I wonder if more bedrooms does not equal greater possibility of, let's say, working class families. The pitfall, of course, is that people have roommates instead of having family members in there. So those are just my concerns about this, but very much welcome the forward thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I see Mitch Novak has his hand raised. Mitch, welcome.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Laura brought up a good point regarding setbacks. The Moxie is a nice project. Too bad it isn't residential. But the fact that it's not right on top of the street, it's contextual and compatible in its setback. The 25 feet of additional height, it is a nice incentive, but I agree with Daniel Serraldo. We need to see contextual drawings to understand the impact. I think we're moving, or you guys are moving in the right direction. Hotels, I believe there should be a moratorium within the city at this time until we understand the impact of those that are in the pipeline will have on this community. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, seeing no other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, I'm going to close the recent opportunity to be heard. Is there a motion on the table on this item?
I'll move it.
Okay, and your motion is, for the record?
Move forward with this with a favorable recommendation for a first reading.
Okay.
Comment?
Yes, Commissioner Dominguez on the
I would
motion.
be favorable with the amendments that I mentioned, setbacks, some parking for workers and things of that nature.
Sure. For setbacks, Tom, through the chair, if there is, for example, a historic property, but they can build, I guess, like above, and there are no setbacks, what happens then?
Currently, if someone is proposing a residential or hotel project, either as an addition or new construction, there are minimum setbacks. For hotels, for instance, the taller portions of the building have to be well set back from the front as well as from the sides. And so those setback requirements would also apply to residential, and we could make sure that those are adequate for the residential
Great.
projects that are proposed here.
And on the motion on the table, what I would encourage us to do as well is within the existing density of Washington Avenue, to be able to transfer density between properties so that you achieve the effect of this ordinance, which is to be able to go up to, what is it, 3.0 FAR for non-transient residential, but without over-intensifying the entire street, so that we can use unused FAR that may exist on Washington Avenue and allow it to shift between properties on Washington Avenue. That's an amendment that I would like to place on the table because it still achieves the objective of increasing to 3.0 FAR for non-transient uses without going in and now on the entire street increasing the FAR. I don't know how my colleagues feel on this matter.
So how exactly would that work? So you wouldn't be going from, so you would want to keep it at 2, but allow the developer to buy FAR from where? From only within that district along Washington Avenue, or from like Flamingo Park?
Listen, there are aging buildings in Flamingo Park, for example, also. That have unused FAR that are, starting to encounter structural issues and the need to upgrade their properties. This could be an opportunity for them to be able to transfer FAR over to Washington Avenue. And even within Washington Avenue itself, allowing the transfer of FAR so that we don't over-intensify this corridor. That's my concern. I want to be measured. I think this is a good goal, and we need to advance in this area. I just don't want us to. The moment we increase the FAR to 3.0, we can't take that away without running into a Harris claim.
Well, it is 7 to 10 years. It would only last. It wouldn't be forever. It would only be, Tom, if you correct me if I'm wrong, up to a decade. That they can take advantage of this program.
It was
So
sunset.
it would have a sunset period. So that's why I'm a little hesitant to do the sort of the trade program. But correct me if I'm wrong, before I think we got elected, or Tanya and I, wasn't there an item on this and it got voted down to allow the transfer of FAR between neighborhoods? Tom?
So when the Washington Avenue Committee convened in 2015, one of the ideas put forward was to allow FAR to establish a TDR district, which at that time would have required voter approval, to allow FAR to be transferred from the west side of Washington Avenue to the east side, with the intention of developing residential. The Washington Avenue panel did not vote in favor of that and did not send that to the commission as a recommendation.
But that was the Washington Avenue panel. It was not a policy decision of the city commission.
That's correct.
I thought there was something.
Yeah, I thought.
Right, from like a year.
Through the chair, I don't remember when it was, but I do remember MBU opining on it. I don't know where it went, but my concern, in principle, it's a great solution. My concern with it, though, as we see all the time and again in the city, if you do something like this, people will abuse it. And I'm very concerned. I mean, if there's a way to do it so that it is super limited to, also be sunset in 7 to 10 years and also be only between properties on Washington or potentially properties between Flamingo Park and Washington, maybe. But I'd want those hatches to be screwed down super tight because the terrible outcome would be if, people started doing, taking underutilized FAR in single-family neighborhoods and building, 41st up to 20-story buildings or, whatever terrible consequence could be. I know you like to say there are no unintended consequences, but you and I don't agree on that. I think sometimes there are, and I don't think that either of us would want that to be one of them. So in the ideal world, we could move this forward and also separately look at the TDR districts and see if there's a way to do it in a really super limited manner so that it doesn't get, dragged all over the city and us have to clean up
Thank
that
you.
mess.
I think we can have a separate discussion on TDRs, on transferable development rights. I bring it up just because, with the approval of this item, whenever it goes to the planning board, it will become zoning in progress. We will, in essence, for the next decade, have increased FAR on Washington Avenue to 3.0. And that's something that over the course of that decade, we won't be able to draw back. And so that's why my preference would be to do this through a transfer program, so that even if it's only within properties on Washington Avenue, properties within Washington Avenue could transfer between each other density or FAR, so that we don't overdevelop Washington Avenue. Because again, the moment we set that 3.0 number for the next decade, we can't pull that back. And so, but with that, there is a motion and a second on the table.
Just through the chair,
Yes.
I'm totally okay with making it to 5 years. I mean, I think we'll have,
Yeah.
I think that's a good carrot. I don't think we need to wait a decade. I'm certainly okay with 5 years, so that we're still on the commission, hopefully. By the time this sort of sunsets, and then we can do another 5 years if it's warranted.
And from what I've seen, and Mr. Director, correct me if I'm wrong, sunset provisions serve as incentives the shorter the window is. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I mean, we've seen it on Washington Avenue with certain incentives that we've said that the sunset provisions were not as extended as a decade. I think we've also did it with office space in Sunset Harbor, if memory serves me right. So I would much rather see us do a shorter
Yeah.
window, because it does encourage, the results that we want to see to occur sooner. I'm going to recognize Commissioner Magazine, and then we'll call the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Keep this very quick out of respect to the committee. Totally agree with your sentiment. The one thing that also could help limit total proliferation along Washington Avenue is there are a number of contributing historic structures that actually wouldn't really be compatible with any type of adaptive reuse. The building where Vendome comes as an example, just because of how the roof is, that wouldn't be able to essentially add for any type of a height incentive, regardless of what that, it could be a 10.0 FAR. They wouldn't be able to touch the top of the building. That would really limit that. And I'm sure that there's a number of other contributing structures where any type of additional reuse would be very difficult to achieve. And also, Tom, if you'd be able to add my name as a co-sponsor, I think taking our commercial corridors that are run down and turning them into mixed-use development could be one of the most impactful lasting legacies that we leave in our city. And this is very data-driven. Even organizations such as the EPA talk about the reduce in emissions, transmissions, and things like that. So fully supportive.
Thank you, Commissioner Magazine. With that, Vice Mayor Dominguez, and then we'll call the vote.
Just one quick comment, I'm not sure if you've addressed it, is to have some parking.
Oh, yes.
I don't mean parking for all, but some for,
So for service work, for
Exactly.
person, yeah, I think there's parking for residents in the traditional building. Like everyone gets like one spot typically, or 80%.
I think it's 1.5. Is that?
Yeah,
Depends on the size of the unit, but it's between 1.5 and 2 spaces per
right.
unit.
But we could certainly allow for parking for service workers, that service the building, or the tenants. Maybe make 10% of the units have to have available parking for service workers inside the building. So I'm totally open to that. But the whole idea is that no one has to drive.
get it.
Yeah.
yeah, with that amendment added.
There's a motion and a second. Who was the commissioner that made the second? Okay, so by acclamation, we can show the item as adopted?
And, Mr. Chair, just for clarity purposes, with regard to the TDR,
Let's bring a separate item. Let's do a referral to committee on TDRs. And I'd also like to do a referral to committee to explore how we can expedite a dedicated bus lane on Washington Avenue to go aligned with zoning vision that we're advancing for the corridor.
and then lastly, this was a dual referral, so this will go to planning board and then come back to the commission for first reading after planning board transmits with a recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Let's introduce item number 2.
Okay, item number 2, expedite the opening of the Baywalk and move the development of the Baywalk up on the GeoBond prioritization list and present the Baywalk plan to the Land Use and Sustainability Committee.
Vice Mayor Dominguez, this is your item. You're welcome to present.
Yeah, so this item was initially started by Commissioner Mark Samulin, and you took it over, and I have it, and we're all wanting that big walk completed. The last update that I received was that the area behind the Mondrian was getting ready to get started, and now I understand that there's a 30-day delay. So it'll start at the end of June, and they have until December 2025 to complete?
Yeah, David Gomez, interim director for capital improvements. If I could clarify just a little bit. The area behind the Mondrian Hotel, what we refer to as the 10th to 12th Street Baywalk, did install test piles, I think it was last week, and they are expected to come in and begin the actual pile installation middle of this month. So it did run a week or two behind schedule, but they are under construction and they are moving. The portion that is running about 30 days behind is the pedestrian bridge, where they had committed to beginning, to mobilizing at the end of May. And their current update, which we received a few days ago, indicates mobilization at the end of June. Now, their completion date did not change, so they will be making up that time during construction. And they are scheduled to be complete with the pedestrian bridge December of 2025.
Great, thank you for the update, and that's all I wanted for it to be heard. Did you have anything to add, Mr. Chair?
I'll just add, I don't want to see a delay. There was a schedule that was provided, that's been provided to the public, that's been included in our documents, and it's in our agenda. It was a public commitment that this was the schedule that was going to be followed. I will not be entertaining any related items of the developer on any other matters that the developer is associated on until we are back on track, back on schedule with this project.
Okay.
Delays are a non-starter. This project has been delayed sufficient as it is. And so I see representatives of the developer here. I don't know if you have anything else to add for the record on the reasons for the delay. What are the plans to get this, to mitigate these delays and get the project back on schedule?
Good afternoon, everyone. Alice Bravo and Associates, working with 500 TCH Alton. We're going through the process, and we have now submitted the final plans to FDOT. So based on the 100% review comments, our design team have addressed those. The city conducted a peer review as required by FDOT. So some information was required on where the building connects to the West Avenue part of the bridge. So it took a while to gather all those pieces together, but that has been submitted to FDOT. Also received requests for additional information from FDOT for the aerial rights agreement. So we're working through that process and providing everything we need to provide to move it forward as expeditiously as possible.
All right. My expectation, and I would imagine the expectation of this committee would be to see us back on track by the July meeting. Again, I will not be supporting advancing on anything related to this development team until such time that this project is back on schedule. Both projects, the pedestrian bridge, and the bay walk behind the Mondrian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 3.
Okay, Mr. Chair, item number 3 is to review zoning districts where entertainment, which includes nightclubs, is a permitted or conditional use, and consider amending the land development regulations to list entertainment as a conditional or prohibited use in specified zoning districts, as well as incentivize supper club restaurants offering indoor performances within districts that permit entertainment.
Okay, Commissioner Suarez, this is your item. You're recognized to introduce your item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was an item that was received, I believe, 2 land use meetings ago. And it wanted, I think Commissioner Fernandez, you requested an official ordinance. And so Tom and I put something a little bit more concrete together. I think based on the feedback last time from the committee that there was less of an incentive for supper clubs, which, by the way, I'm totally okay with. I wanted to lead with a carrot, not a stick, and the intent of this change is to really limit the amount of nightclubs that are just keep on causing a multitude of problems for our residents and our quality of life. And so, PJ, can you pull up the slide through the chair? That's okay. I have a
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a series of slides throughout the last decade of issues that have come from our nightclubs. This was obviously a couple months ago, or a month ago, where we had that devastating, basically a hit on Washington. Can you go to the next slide, PJ? And you can cycle through these every 10 seconds. Man killed, 2 women hurt in Miami Beach nightclub shooting. Gala nightclub, that was last year. Keep going. Yeah, Pandemonium shooting in South Beach club, kills 1, injures 2. It's just when I was researching this, I mean, the amount of rape, sexual abuse, the murders in nightclubs, we really have to ask ourselves, is this a good look for Miami Beach? Do we want to continue to allow this business model in Miami Beach? And I certainly do not want to. I think there's a host of issues when it comes to these standard nightclubs of yesteryear, where or it certainly seems like anything goes. During Memorial Day weekend, I walked out and I walked the streets of Washington, and it's chaos. I mean, you have motorcycle gangs going up and down doing wheelies on Washington. I walked out of one of the, not walked out, I walked by one of these nightclubs, or a couple of them. I mean, there were underage girls there. I'm talking 15, 16 years old. They were so young, I felt uncomfortable taking pictures of them because they were minors. And so, I think Miami Beach has graduated where we do not need to rely on this aspect of nightlife to carry our brand or for whatever tax revenue that these nightclubs might bring in. I think in essence, it negatively impacts our finances because of the amount of police and code resources that we have to put toward these establishments. So my item is proactive. It will not affect any existing businesses. Tom, through the chair, if you can tee up the meat and potatoes of the item, please.
Mr. Director, you're recognized.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as Commissioner Suarez indicated, per the direction of the Land Use Committee on May 1st, we did develop an ordinance based upon the discussion at the last meeting. And it's summarized in the memo, and I'll go through it very quickly. The first thing that we did was we established a clear definition for restaurant supper club. And this is different from the definition of restaurant, and basically establishes a much higher bar for a restaurant supper club. It basically takes away the ability for clubs to game the restaurant definition by serving nothing more than bar bites. This establishes minimum kitchen requirements and minimum food service requirements. The other major change was that we created a more comprehensive and clear set of regulations for entertainment uses under Section 7.5.5.4. Tangential amendments were done to the applicable zoning districts to reference 7.5.4. And basically within this area, we amended and clarified that entertainment is not permitted in the RM1 district, which is, with the exception of very limited properties, including the International Inn and the Miami Beach Women's Club, which had previously approved regulations. Within the RM2 districts, indoor entertainment would only be permitted as an accessory use to a hotel, which is currently the case, but only if the hotel has a restaurant supper club and the entertainment would be part of a restaurant supper club. Indoor entertainment in the RM2 district would require conditional use regardless of the occ load, and the maximum occ load for a venue with indoor entertainment could not exceed 300 persons. In the RM3 district, indoor entertainment, again, is only permitted as an accessory use currently to a hotel and an apartment. This would limit it to being an accessory use to a hotel and only as part of a restaurant supper club. Alternatively, if the hotel has a venue that does not serve alcohol past 2 a.m., then indoor entertainment would be permitted as part of that venue, but not past 2 a.m. Within the CD2 and CD3 and TCC, TC1, TC2, and MXC districts, which are the primary commercial districts, indoor entertainment would be permitted as part of a restaurant supper club, and they could stay open until 5 a.m. However, if there was an indoor entertainment venue that proposed not to have a restaurant supper club, they would have to close no later than 2 a.m. This would allow for things like jazz clubs and Latin music clubs, but it would no longer allow for nightclubs. And nightclubs are typically the venues that want to be open from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. Within these commercial districts, the indoor occupancy threshold for planning board approval would be lowered from 200 persons to 125 persons. The other major changes were a no variance provision was added, and we also created standards for non-conforming entertainment establishments. This was a dual referral, and so if there is support for the ordinance that is attached to this, or as may be amended, it can proceed directly to the planning board.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Just a few questions. So this is prospective in nature. So existing establishments under our existing regulations that have invested in our city would be able to remain operating. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But this is now shaping new policies and setting a new vision for the future of our city, for the caliber of the establishments that we want to bring into our city.
That's correct.
And so in general, what we're saying is that rather than these freestanding entertainment establishments with late night alcohol sales, they need to be more of a sit-down type of restaurant, and this legislation prescribes the type of infrastructure these establishments need to have in place.
That's correct.
And does it require any minimum food sales?
Yes, under the draft ordinance, it's 60% annual food sales. So at least 60% of the annual sales have to be food sales.
Now, we're not saying that, because I do believe that entertainment is part of why people want to come to Miami Beach. It's part of the character of our city. So we're not saying that we're outlying standalone bars and nightclubs with entertainment, but if they do exist in the future, someone wishes to come with an idea of a bar or a nightclub establishment with entertainment, they would have to close by 2 a.m. Is that what this ordinance is proposing?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, and then those same types of establishments, but with no entertainment, they would be able to continue operating until 5 a.m.
Correct. This is specific to entertainment.
Okay, and supper clubs would also be able to continue until 5 a.m.
Correct.
Okay, how is this, because the one area where I feel that we've always been, I think I think this is taking us in the right direction, by the way. I think this is, aligned with the direction that I think our community wants to go in. And I think we have to be balanced about it. I think one of the things we've always been very balanced about is those venues within fully enclosed hotel establishments. How does this ordinance treat this?
Within fully enclosed hotel establishments in the RM2 and RM3 district, entertainment would be permitted, but only as part of a supper club. If a hotel had an existing non-restaurant entertainment venue, that could continue, but hotels in the RM2 and RM3 district would no longer be able to open a new solely entertainment venue unless they wanted to close by 2 a.m.
Okay, I think that that's the one area I think we can advance in this policy. I think we need to leave room for opportunity, because I think we continue to be a destination. I think that hotels will be always, I think, very selective about the caliber of establishment that they bring into their hotels, because their guests are exposed to that. I'm happy to support this item if we can look at making exception for venues that are not supper clubs, but that are within fully enclosed hotels. I think that that's part of the history of our city, is part of the experience that individuals that come to our city want to have. And it's very different than some of these standalone nightclubs that we've seen on Washington Avenue, and that we've seen on Collins Avenue, and that we've seen, some on Ocean Drive and on Lincoln Road, where we've seen issues, and shootings, and drug dealing in the past. It's a little bit different when you are in a fully enclosed hotel that has a security plan, an operational plan. It's a little bit different. So I'm all for the direction that is being proposed here, for as long as we can see how we can continue to accommodate certain entertainment that's not supper clubs within fully enclosed hotels. Are there any other comments from the dais on this item?
I have a question.
Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing this forward. I know the intent of where it's coming from, and to change the image of our city. It is sweeping legislation that has citywide implications. So when you said that it's prospective, I thought when I read through, some of the prohibitions would change the use of some of these places. Like would make them non-conforming now. So it isn't prospective in every single aspect.
So what we meant by prospective is these regulations would only be applicable to new establishments. However, if you are an existing establishment that does not comport with these requirements, you would then likely become legal nonconforming, which means that you can continue to operate as a legal nonconforming establishment. However, you would not be able to expand or relocate.
And if you make improvements to the property, they cannot exceed 50% of the value of the property,
50% of the value of the building, that's correct.
of the building.
So if I may.
Yes,
just-
you're recognized.
To Bill.
And let me just, are you done with your
Yeah,
comment?
that was my question, because it really is in perspective, it really is in perspective. There are some changes that would affect existing establishments.
Well, but to the extent that they become legal non-conforming, they're able to continue operating. They're able to continue renewing their BTRs. They just become legal non-conforming, which we pass ordinances all the time in which establishments become legal non-conforming. They stay legal non-conforming for a while. Yeah, pretty much. Commissioner Bott, you're the vice chair, actually. I meant to say vice mayor earlier, Commissioner Dominguez, because Commissioner Bott is the vice chair of
That's okay.
the committee. Well,
So just hypothetically speaking, so years ago, the Diplomat Hotel in Hallandale expanded to their outlot and created an entertainment venue there. Hypothetically, if one of our hotels that has a nightclub operating indoors and is a reasonably good operator decided they were going to do something like that, expand to a different plot of land that they own that is contiguous with the hotel, and everything was fine with the neighbors, everyone was on board with it, they would not be able to, because they were now legal non-conforming businesses, and so therefore any kind of differently imagined use or expanded use would no longer be permissible.
The non-conforming use could not be expanded. So if the owner of a hotel wanted to expand the hotel portion, but the non-conforming nightclub remained exactly where it was and was not impacted, the hotel, which is conforming, assuming the hotel is a conforming use in the district, could potentially expand. However, if the entertainment venue becomes non-conforming, that entertainment could not relocate to another part of the hotel or expand within the hotel.
Do we have data somewhere, Commissioner Suarez, maybe you know, or I don't know if we have it someplace, but of the calls for service for nightclub operators, how many of them go to standalone nightclubs versus, do you have the data?
Commissioner Dominguez, you're recognized.
So sorry. I don't have data, but I had a conversation last week with the chief of police, and he says if people were to pull up how many calls I get for in hotels, it's more than the standalone.
It's more.
Yeah, but I don't have the data. That was just a casual conversation I had with the police.
Okay, because I think where the goal of this is to kind of tamp down the unwanted behavior, especially on Washington, where there's a concentration of this kind of thing. I would just, I know this is not your favorite thing, Commissioner Suarez, but before we make completely major change to what our city can and can't be, I would like to have some facts in front of us, like where are the calls for service coming from? Is it Washington? Is it nightclubs and hotels? Is it little tiny bars in neighborhoods? Like, so that we can craft legislation that addresses the concern without, in one fell swoop, taking out other businesses who might be operating in a very respectable and proper manner, and, catching all the fish in the net rather than the bad, not to mix my metaphors, but rather than just the bad apples.
So I'm going to recognize Commissioner Suarez, and then I'm going to open up the floor to public comments.
Yeah, look, as you saw in the slideshow, it happens everywhere from nightclubs that are in hotels to nightclubs that are standalone. And if you want to just do it on one area, what's going to happen is like squeezing a balloon. It's going to go to the other side of Miami Beach. And, I think we all don't want that. I think, Commissioner Bott, you're always one to say, let's be the city we want, not the city we are. And, I think the city we want is a resident-focused vision for Miami Beach. And from all the headlines that you saw, I mean, because really, if you think about it, that sort of attention draws more attention, right? Shootings just cause more shootings. Fights that happen in clubs cause more fights that spill out onto the street. Not to mention the amount of like collateral, I guess, damage that from cars racing down the road to after the nightclub, people spilling out drunk, puking everywhere. I mean, it's just it's not a good look, and I certainly don't want to move that problem to another part of the beach. And I think, look, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. These nightclubs are not what they used to be. You know, from I guess the '80s, where they didn't have shootings in clubs. Now it seems like there's a shooting at least once a year in one of these clubs. And, you know, we talk about spring break. You know, spring break is just like any other night on Miami Beach on steroids. And, you know, we have to address spring break on a 365-day basis, not just the month of March. And the way you do that is, sure, we have a great world-class police, but, you know, they're fighting with two hands tied behind their back. They really need help on zoning changes and to remove the elements that encourage unwanted behavior.
Thank you. I just, you know, I also want us to be mindful. I don't believe that this is a silver bullet.
Of course not.
You know, when we look at the issues that our law enforcement is dealing with, you look throughout our county, throughout South Florida, throughout the region, it's issues that affect all communities that, you know, might not have an exchange or a gala or a voodoo lounge or a mansion. The issues of violence and drug dealing, and specifically gun violence, it is something that we're not going to solve with this, but I do think it helps us refine our brand, and it helps us better align our community with the more resident-centered quality of life that we want to be advancing, and that we can use our land development regulations as an avenue to advancing. Commissioner Magazine, do you have any comments on this item before I open up the floor?
Many. I was just going to let this play out, but thank you for recognizing that. I do think that there's a place inside hotels. I know when we were talking 2 a.m., it was important not to single out any individuals, so that's not my intent here, but it's just highlighting good examples at the Faena Hotel, right? They have some of the highest ADRs and highest residential housing rates in the entire world, yet they're able to operate a pretty successful and high-end lounge, nightclub, whatever you want to call it, in the basement that I happen to be a big fan of. So I think there is a place. I want to be careful about not oversweeping legislation that does have some unintended consequences, because there's been times where high-end nightlife has helped revitalize Miami Beach. That being said, it is a concentration for problems along some of our commercial corridors, where I would love to lead with a carrot rather than the stick, and that's part of my support for turning some of the Washington Avenue-like commercial corridors into mixed use, because my feeling is similar to Commissioner Suarez. When you have residents with a vested interest, they're not going to stand for that type of entertainment or antics in their backyard. So naturally and organically, it's going to filter out. And then another concern is, if you look at properties like the former Cameo, or where M2 is currently, if they're not nightclubs, what could those spaces possibly be? So we would also have to consider land use changes or incentives to say, okay, if they're not going to be a nightclub, what could Cameo be? I think we're seeing something similar with where Senor Frogs was on 14th or 15th and Collins, where it's a very hard space. And if it's not going to be, imagine if you took out an entertainment venue. I'd like to say there's only so many T-shirt shops and souvenir stores they could go in, but that limit is being tested.
Well, and we've passed policy limiting those nuisance uses. We've limited T-shirt shops, tattoo parlors, check cashing stores, What else have we limited in these areas?
Occult science establishments, vape stores, liquor stores.
Yeah. So we've already passed a number, especially within the MXC and South Beach. We've already passed a number of these regulations that limit what could go into these establishments, and then we have to get creative, okay? So we know what we don't want to be, but what do we want to be?
Yeah, so where I'll leave you, because I guess you're trying to get where I'll come out on this, I'd love to support something a little more fine-tuned. I'll leave it to the committee members to hopefully deliver on something like that, and, can't promise where I'll be one way or another when this comes to the commission, but I'd love to see something a little more fine-tuned that I can be supportive of.
Thank you, Commissioner. With that, I'm going to open up the floor to members of the public wishing to speak on this item. If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand on Zoom. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Monica Enton. Couple of things, I think, I've been listening to the direction that it seems like you want to go in, more high-end supper club feel. I think one of the things you need to consider when you're looking at that is part of your definition with the 60% food sales versus alcohol sales. We've all been to nice high-end restaurants where we've ordered a bottle of wine. And when we order a bottle of wine and everybody orders a bottle of wine, then all of a sudden that 60% will never be met. Also, I order a hamburger. And I might be paying $20 for that hamburger, but my cocktail that goes along with it is $24, $25. So that 60% is a very difficult range to look at. So I implore you to look at that part of your definition. Also, if this is moving forward to the planning board, I would request that you add an applicability clause for those existing businesses that have permits in place for either improvements, expansions, et cetera, so that there is no zoning in progress that would impact them through those existing permits or process numbers that they have.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing no other members of the public on this item, I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Director, explain to me I'm sorry, I'm going to reopen the public hearing. I see Mitch Novick has his hand raised. Mitch, welcome. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you for recognizing me, Commissioner. I can't begin to estimate the number of times Miami Beach Police Department has come to my place to review my CCTV footage going back decades, 25 years at least. I remember there was one incident where a woman was walking across, walking up 9th Street towards Collins. She was stumbling. A predator was behind her. You could see her at the front porch of my building. He took her to what was a vacant building next door, sexually assaulted her and battered her. And this situation has repeated itself dozens of times in my mind, based on the number of times the police have visited me to retrieve such or similar footage. It's time our city becomes more sophisticated. We grow up, we get out of this nightclub party till you drop entertainment phase. We should rolling back closing time to prospective businesses is a good idea. And the criminality of what happens in my district is very clear. And I hope you move forward in a positive direction and not stagger what I consider this is good, sound legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Mr. Director, explain to me conditional use permits, establishments, that might be, a standalone bar and nightclub with entertainment, but has a conditional use permit that may allow them to operate till 5 a.m. How would those be treated under the provisions of the ordinance before us?
Currently, the thresholds for conditional use requirements for entertainment establishments are all outdoor or open air entertainment establishments, regardless of load, require conditional use approval. And for indoor establishments that have any type of entertainment component, the threshold is 200 persons. So if you're over 200 persons and you're indoors, you require conditional use approval. The conditional use approval would be extended to all entertainment venues in RM2 and RM3 districts, regardless of occupational content. So even if you're under 200 persons, you would still be required to get conditional use approval. In the commercial districts, the threshold would be lowered from 200 persons to 125 persons.
Establishments that currently have a conditional use permit, how would they be treated?
So establishments that have a conditional use permit would be, they would still have to abide by all the current requirements within their CUP. If the establishment should become legal nonconforming, they would not be able to expand their operation nor expand the requirements of the CUP, but the CUP would still be applicable to the establishment.
They would not be able to expand the conditions within the CUP.
Correct. They wouldn't be able to expand the conditions of the CUP that would result in an expansion of the operation. For instance, they wouldn't be able to expand their OC load or expand the number of seats. But if they were called back on a progress report, the planning board could adjust the conditions in a more restrictive manner.
Understood. In essence, this would help us incentivize even existing establishments, even those with a CUP. It would help us incentivize a shift in business model towards this new direction.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Suarez, is there a motion on the table?
Yeah, I'm okay with leaving it in the hotel. Good point, Commissioner Fernandez. I mean, I think if it's confined, I think you're right. I would hope that the establishment would ensure that it's a safe operation and is not a disruption to the community.
Is there a motion on the table, please? We need to.
I'm as amended with the hotel. I move the item.
Okay, there's a motion. I'll second the item. Do we want to do a roll call and vote on this item? Just for.
Sure, I can do a roll call. Okay. Based upon the motion that was made by Commissioner Suarez, seconded by the chair, Commissioner Fernandez, we would be moving this item to the planning board with a favorable recommendation.
As
with-
amended.
Yeah, with the modification to allow 5 a.m. entertainment establishments within enclosed hotels. Commissioner Bott,
Yes.
Commissioner Dominguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Suarez,
Yes.
and Commissioner Fernandez.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right.
And Mr. Chair, before we move on to the next item, I just wanted to confirm that on item number 2, which is the Baywalk discussion, that's going to be continued to the July 9th meeting for another update.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. We have a 5 p.m. time certain, Mr. Director?
Yes.
Okay, and are they, which item? Let's introduce that item.
Okay. This is item number 12, and this is to discuss an initiative to pilot a decibel system for noise enforcement, including the installation of noise meters in the entertainment district.
Thank you, colleagues. This is an item that I placed on the agenda. We initiated a discussion on this item last month to see how we can better establish real objective criteria and better instruments for the enforcement of noise in our city. And I believe that our current criteria is frankly very subjective, very open to interpretation, and not serving in the best interest of our community, given the amount of complaints that we get. And what we've seen is overlapping support both from our business community and both from our residents community towards a direction to amend perhaps our mechanisms for enforcement by mandating fixed decibel level with instruments for possible enforcement of this. This is where we left off the conversation at the last meeting, and we were going to invite the city's sound consultant to join us today for a presentation on how we could possibly go about a pilot program, Mr. Mooney, for the creation of such policies. I don't know if you can fill us in on this a little bit more.
Sure. We did confirm with our sound consultant, and I believe his name is Ken. He should be on Zoom. I'm not sure if he is on Zoom, if he could raise his hand just to let us know that he is here. But as part of the discussion at the May 1st meeting, the committee had asked us to come back to the committee with some research on some different cities that had utilized decibel codes. And these included the cities of New York, Philadelphia, and Paris, France. And as you will note in the memo that is attached to this, we did do some research on that. In Paris, ironically, most of the decibel readers were geared toward motorcycles and vehicles that were creating unwanted noise on the streets and that residents were hearing from their units. However, in Philadelphia and New York, they did have a fairly robust decibel system. And we've included in the memo some fairly detailed information. So for instance, in the city of Philadelphia, they contain a provision regarding sound near protected facilities and sound from residential properties, and it sets forth actual decibel levels that cannot be exceeded in proximity to those parcels. New York City has a very extensive decibel system, and as you can see from both the guide and from the code that is attached to this, it's very, very far-reaching. And so this is some information that's being provided to help hopefully inform the commission's decision or the committee's decision in terms of your recommendation to the committee.
Thank you. And is there a presentation for us from the consultant?
The consultant, I believe, is just here to answer questions based upon the proposal that was provided last year, March 1st of 2023. That is also attached to the memo, and I believe Ken from Arpeggio Sound Group could answer any questions with regard to that.
Ken, welcome. Why don't you guide us through your proposal and how you could better guide our city in establishing what could be an appropriate noise enforcement policy within Miami Beach?
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you and answer such questions as you may have. The key element, if you will, for a decibel-based program is understanding what are the levels, what levels do your stakeholders find acceptable, and what levels stakeholders find objectionable. And then also the feasibility of being able to attribute a specific level to a specific source. So our proposal is speaking more to the objective side of that, the quantitative side, populating sound level meters throughout the entertainment district and in a district to the west that's should not be exposed to the similar sounds. Leaving the meters in place for approximately 30 days, logging data, but not necessarily audio recordings. The proposal has provisions then for us to perform spot roving observations. So we're able to qualitatively link what our observers are hearing to the environment with timestamps. So then when we go back into the data, we can look for those correlations. We would also propose doing what's called a sound plan computational model. And that's using the data and knowledge of the sound sources within the entertainment district, within the survey area that's identified to us, to produce basically heat maps of noise distribution within the district and then out to some distance beyond it, beyond the boundaries of the study area. And we would do that so that you have a basis for understanding the geographic extent of noise impacts, as well as how sounds are going to propagate out away from these venues. That in a nutshell is our proposal.
So you come into our city, and within this geographic area, you would install or deploy stationary sound meters. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then using those stationary sound meters, you're able to perform, I guess, an analysis of what is the natural noise in the area as opposed to the noise coming out from establishments.
To an extent, yes.
Okay. And now,
we have to be able to identify times when there are sounds that are considered to be natural, the ambient environment. And that's typically done through logging of activity levels to time of day, location, that sort of thing.
And using this data, then our staff is able to use this data, I guess, in consultation with you to help establish what would be a proper decibel level to establish in our city, establishing like what would be the base for noise enforcement in our city. Would that be correct, Mr. Mooney?
Yeah, I believe so, and it probably would depend upon the different areas of the city, but I believe that's what the intention of this type of system is.
Okay, and so the exact deployment of your sound meters, how long is that deployed in the area for?
The last proposal we submitted anticipated a 30-day deployment period. 30 days would capture multiple weekends, multiple weekdays, would give us a reasonably good statistical basis for drawing conclusions over time spans of relatively granular nature now. You know, as compared to if you just came in on a single weekend and it was an unusually quiet weekend, or there was something that was unusual at that weekend, be it environment, be it some activity happening, you have less confidence in the statistical validity of the results.
Okay. And Mr. Mooney, you feel comfortable working with this vendor in obtaining? I mean, this is the vendor that works with the city, with your department on noise policies.
That's correct. This vendor is our peer reviewer for sound studies that are submitted as part of the planning board CUP process.
Okay, and how would we be using the data that comes out of this pilot program to look at our policies and update our policies?
Depending upon the data that is provided, the commission could decide whether or not it would want to institute a decibel level as a way of informing our regulation of noise and sound, or excessive noise and sound in the city.
Okay. Are there any questions from the dais for this vendor? Yes, I recognize Commissioner Bott.
Thank you. So how do we choose the month? Because I would imagine August sounds pretty different than January.
It would be up to the commission to decide which month, but I believe that our sound consultant could probably provide a recommendation on whether or not some months might be better than others in terms of maximum sound that could be projected.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm going with this. The other question is a dumb question, I'm sure, but New York is much bigger and denser than we are. They have very clear guidelines already of what is appropriate and is not. Would it be completely unheard of to use their guidelines as a starting point, and instead of spending money to do our own study, is just do a pilot program using these guidelines as a starting point, and then learning from that instead?
Whether New York's established decibel levels would be applicable to Miami Beach, I couldn't answer that, at least not today. That's something where we could consult with Ken and Jesse from Arpeggio to see whether or not those levels would be applicable in Miami Beach. But I think without data, and Ken can correct me if I'm wrong, it's going to be difficult to establish whether or not those decibel levels that they use in New York City would be applicable in Miami Beach.
If I may briefly contribute here, there are other cities beyond New York who face challenges such as you have here. New Orleans and Bourbon Street District, for example, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Memphis, and they have promulgated, if I recall correctly, decibel-based programs in those contexts. So there's a body of knowledge out there that we can assist with.
So then, given that there are, and I would say any of those three cities might be more analogous to the issues we face here, in the interest of, and I'm not trying to take work away from Arpeggio, but in the interest of saving $500,000, could we not sort of use the research and the guidelines that are set for New York and these other places and come up with a recommended pilot study to implement and do over the course of 3 months or 4 months or whatever we do, and then say, you know what, this worked really well, we'd recommend tweaking this is too low of a threshold, that's too high of a threshold, and proceed that way instead of doing a study and then deciding if we want to do a pilot test, and doing the pilot test, and then, you know, just sort of compressing the timeline a little bit to get to more real life information.
And what I like to do is because I think with all of this, we want to make sure that we stay within a legal framework, because these are all policies that are unique to each community, and I want to make sure that our city attorney feels comfortable with this type of recommendation, because I think you are very wise. We might not have to reinvent a wheel, here. Pressure cleaner is a pressure cleaner. And the noise emanating from a pressure cleaner is going to be the same in Miami as in Miami Beach as it would be in New York or Chattanooga or New Orleans. So I'd like to recognize our Chief Deputy City Attorney, Nick Kalergis, who's joining us virtually today to chime in on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll just respond very briefly. Given that each of these cities are so different, we are different from New York and New Orleans. I think it would be a good idea to have a solid basis that's unique to us in drafting a decibel-based standard, if that's where we end up going. Not just because the Miami Beach is different from New Orleans and New York, but also because different neighborhoods in Miami Beach are different from each other. And you may end up having, a threshold for the entertainment district that is maybe a little higher than say, a residential district. So I do think it would be a good idea to do our own study.
And the one thing that I would also say is that I do believe that natural environmental matters do affect the way that noise carries. Also built environment affects the way the noise travels. And perhaps, the build out of New York causes for noise to reverberate or to travel a certain way that it wouldn't in our environment. But, at the same time, our being in a tropical, more open space environment, you have those elements that also play a role there that make us unique to some of these other communities. In fact, the one thing that I don't like about this proposal is what it doesn't include, which is helping us draft what a revised noise ordinance could potentially look like. And that's the one thing that I would like for us to see is, based on the experience that this company has already working with our city, coming in, having them do this pilot program in portions of our city, such as this geographic area in the entertainment district, to establish what would be a base level, and then draw on their experience in different areas to help us craft new policy that is aligned with the complexities of our city, I think would be helpful. That way, it's crafted not by politics, but it's crafted by sound engineers and professionals in the industry. I don't know. There's other comments from the dais on this. Yes, Commissioner Dominguez.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to pilot it. I know that some of our establishments do their own decibel already, one being Mangoes, because I've heard David Wallach and point out the person that he has with the decimal meter outside. But I think it's a great thing because noise is definitely a problem.
Yes. Is there any other comments from the dais on this item? What I like us to do is for us to recommend that we engage in this pilot program. I believe that back last year, the cost for this pilot program was $110,000 to engage in this study. What I'd like us to do is to see what this proposal would be like if we would expand it to include the drafting of a proposed a revised noise ordinance, because I think that is the heart of it, not just to do this pilot program and get information, but how does that information translate into new policy that can help us, use objective instruments for the enforcement of our noise ordinance. With that, I can't make a motion, but if one of them,
I'll second.
there's a motion and a second. Before we call the vote, I'm going to open up the floor to public comment. Are there members of the public in the chambers wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, I see virtually Mitch Novick has his hand raised. Mitch, welcome. You're recognized.
Thank you, Commissioner. I agree with Commissioner Bott. This is a complete waste of taxpayer money. About 25 years ago, the courts threw out a decibel-based system. I think for you guys to craft policy that'll have an immediate and substantive effect would be to require those businesses which exploit the public realm with blasting noise. If a code compliance officer should hear them from across the street, they should be immediately cited. And it's simple. You want to end our noise problem, you implement a sound policy like that, and that would take care of the problem very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, Mr. Mooney?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify the motion, and this would be to move the item to the City Commission with a recommendation to fund the proposed arpeggio study, including an expanded scope to include a draft ordinance.
That's correct.
And staff will reach out to Arpeggio before taking this to the commission to get a revised price on that scope to include the ordinance.
Thank you. Can we show this item adopted by acclamation? All right. Thank you, colleagues. With that, Mr. Mooney, let's introduce item number 4.
Okay. Item number 4, discuss current incentives for average unit size requirements in residential apartment units.
Thank you. This is an item I placed on the agenda when we adopted the city's resiliency code. We eliminated the average unit size, or not we, but the city commission at the time eliminated the average unit size, and the only exception was when a property would voluntarily proffer that they would not engage in short-term rental activity. Correct me, Mr. Mooney, if I'm wrong. And subsequently, I referred an item to this committee to discuss those current incentives, how many property owners have used it, and whether it would make sense to reintroduce the average unit size into our code.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. The only minor clarification I would make is that when the commission adopted the resiliency code, they removed the average unit size requirement in those districts that currently prohibit short-term rentals. So that would include districts like the RM1 district and the CD1 district. However, in all other districts that allowed for short-term rentals, they reinstated the minimum average unit size requirement, but created a provision that would allow the property owner to forego those minimum average unit size requirements if they agree not to do short-term rentals.
And so by reintroducing the average unit size legislatively in those districts, we in essence lose the incentive that we currently have in place through which we could get a property owner to voluntarily proffer not to do short-term rentals.
That's correct.
So that places this in a very different vantage point. Colleagues, how do we feel about this? And welcome feedback from the dais. If there's no comment from the dais, I'm going to close this item because I do think whenever we have an instrument through which to be able to get a property owner to proffer not to engage in short-term rentals, we should use those. And I don't feel comfortable losing that tool that we currently have. I don't know what other opportunities do we have in our code, Mr. Director, that are like this, because this applies pretty broadly, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. This applies to all districts that currently allow short-term rentals. And since we are preempted under state law from further expanding prohibitions, this is one of the tools that we put in place. Other tools are more district and property specific, as code amendments have been brought forward over the last couple of years. One thing that the commission has done consistently is made sure that any type of code amendment that would provide for a relaxation or an expansion of regulations also includes an agreement by the property owner not to do short-term rentals by covenant.
If I hear no comments from the dais, I would just proceed to close this item, as I wouldn't want to lose this incentive. So can we show this closed by acclamation?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, thank you. With that, Mr. Director, let's introduce the next item.
Okay, item number 5 is discuss potential incentives to convert co-living and transient units to apartments in the North Beach TCC district.
Thank you, and this is an item that we brought forward to see what incentives we could do to provide for more attainable housing options, particularly in the North Beach area. Staff has done an analysis and presented some recommendations for us. Tom, I don't know if you want to walk us through some of your recommendations.
Sure. As you'll note in the memo, with regard to co-living units, there are currently 529 co-living units that have either been permitted or approved. Under the code now, there can be no more co-living units. And so once all of these units are constructed, they would not be able to go past that. If any of these approved units should not move forward, then they would lose their co-living units, and they would have to convert to a different type of unit. One of the things that we noted with regard to co-living units is that they're very unique in terms of square footage and function by their nature. And converting them to traditional residential apartments could be challenging from a construction standpoint. Some of the things that we looked at is perhaps allowing additional co-living units within the area by expanding the cap, but only under the proviso that those co-living units would have to agree by covenant not to be short-term rentals, so they would have to be non-transient co-living units. Another option might be to allow those co-living units that have already been approved, but should their allocation expire for whatever reason, that they could reallocate that allocation or reinstitute that allocation if they agreed moving forward that none of the co-living units would be used for short-term rentals.
And I'm comfortable with both proposals. I know Commissioner Bond had also an interest on this item. Commissioner Magazine, when we initially were discussing this item, you had interest in this as well. What we certainly, didn't want to see was more of these transient units that don't contribute to the character of the community, that in fact cause displacements. And if we can convert some of these into co-living opportunities with no short-term rental and allow individuals to continue living in Miami Beach, individuals who otherwise would be priced out from living in our community, I think it could be a good opportunity if these property owners voluntarily proffer to prohibit these short-term rental activities on their property. I would love the feedback from the committee on the item.
So, there was a flurry of activity which led to 529 units being approved in North Beach, and the repercussions of which have not yet begun to be felt. I'm a big fan of let's see if something works before we open the floodgates, and that is exactly the opposite of what happened here. Do we have, I don't believe we have, but can you confirm if we have any co-living buildings operational yet in the city of Miami Beach?
To the best of my knowledge, no. None of the units that have been approved and permitted have become operational yet.
And we didn't have any before, so there's not one, where something like this might make sense would be across the street from Mount Sinai, when people are doing residencies and they're home for 6 hours to shower and pass out for 5 hours and then go back to work. I think it would be a stretch to suggest that people who want to live in Miami Beach would choose to live in a co-living unit. However, if that is a way to, especially in North Beach where there are no big business hubs as of yet, but if that is a way to disincentivize short-term rentals, then I would be open to the idea of potentially allowing more down the road, but not until we know how these work. I mean, to me, these are glorious hotel rooms. We have 529 new glorious hotel rooms coming online with no controls over them whatsoever, and I don't think it bodes well.
Yeah, and I think the intent was, to convert existing these approved co-living units that also had transient units in them into non-transient units. How far out are we, Tom, from seeing the delivery of some of this inventory?
The only building that is nearing construction completion that has co-living units is located on the north side of 71st Street between, I believe, Byron and Carlisle. And I don't know when they will be coming in for their TCO. I know that they're topped off and that they're very close to completion, but that is the one building that does have co-living units that probably would provide the best barometer once they become operational.
Well, and if I may, they are advertising in the New York Times digital edition as the only short-term rental allowed in Miami Beach. So I don't think they're going to be very interested in taking us up on this.
Okay.
It's disastrous.
So are there any other comments from the dais on this item? Now we can continue this item to a later date, because I think we would want to see what is the impact of this property once it opens up. And I would say continue this item to a later date.
Yeah, and if there's anything any brainstorms that anybody has for the projects that have not yet started, about how we can encourage them to relinquish either their co-living design or their short-term rental design. Frankly, ideally, their short-term rental design, that would be great.
Let's continue this item, Tom, let's say to October. Okay. All right, thank you. Let's introduce the next item.
Okay, this is item number 6, and this is review amendments to the land development regulations to amend the hotel approval process.
Commissioner Magazine, you're the sponsor of this item, and a number of us, Commissioner Bond, myself, Commissioner Rosa Gonzalez, our co-sponsors with you. Thank you for joining us, and please introduce your
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this just goes to the heart of ongoing discussions that we've all had of simple supply and demand, that we are over-commercialized. We have an oversupply of hotel rooms that's pushing down some of our ADRs. And most importantly, when we have a finite amount of land, we want to somewhat limit the over-proliferation of development. Every time a new hotel goes up, that's going to be one less spot where we could have new residential housing, something that is very badly needed. Now, there is a place, I'm not saying that there's not certain areas for hotels in Miami Beach, especially along the waterfront and things like that, because if you have a waterfront hotel versus a waterfront residential, that's not going to be true residential housing, right? It's not going to be housing for our workforce. Oftentimes, if you're on the water, that's people's third, fourth, and fifth homes, fetching millions and millions of dollars. So where I was looking to go for this is similar to something New York City has done, where no longer can you build hotels as of right. There's still incentives around, zoning and land use regulations around hotels, but any hotel occupancy would have to actually come to the city commission to get final approval. You could no longer just build as of right. Where I would like to take that is non-waterfront hotels would have to come to the city commission as to get approval. When I look at some examples, hotels along Fifth Street, or we just saw one pop up on Washington Avenue, a new hotel, and we're all sitting here scratching our heads saying, wow, that would be perfect for residential housing. It brings us to the table with that project to say, okay, how can we actually help build the city that we want, and not just what is kind of being given to us? Now, hopefully with some of these changes in incentives and zoning, this will start taking care of itself. But until we get there, I think it would behoove us, even if we would sunset this, say, for 3 or 4 years, any new hotel that is, let's call it infill, because what I'm really trying to solve is some of these smaller room size hotels that may not be, that really are already serving a need that is really over capacity as is. And they're taking away the opportunity for true workforce and residential housing, that we essentially review that on a case-by-case basis. Maybe we could set it up to come to land use every 3 months or something along those lines. I'm open to, essentially have this fine-tuned as my colleagues see fit. But what I would like to propose is essentially infill, non-waterfront, any hotel that would come on for permitting would have to come to the city commission for final approval. I'll turn that over to the chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Magazine. I like the direction in which your item is going. I don't want us to, at the same time, get in the way of the redevelopment of old hotel inventory that is due to be improved. Would this item require city commission approval? Let's say some of the historic hotels along Collins Avenue. That's some of our older hotel inventory. I think we should be encouraging the redevelopment, the upgrading, the refurbishing of these properties. I would hate for us to build into that another hurdle that they would have to go through. to improve some of these properties. Would this require them to seek city commission approval?
No, I totally agree, and that's why I wanted to leave this open-ended for input from my colleagues, because that is a good thought, especially something like the Delano, let's say, right? That is waterfront, but this wouldn't really be for refurbishing, or at least how I'm envisioning it. It would be for an empty plot of land, like what happened along the Fifth Street corridor. There's certain hotels there where I drive by those every day, and there were open plots of land. I go, wow, that would be so great if that was residential housing, a block from our schools, close to transit, but they're hotels. Right? Sure. And nobody kind of knew that they were coming online. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but I'd like to build for the city that we want to see, not the city that we have. So I'd totally be supportive of, I don't want to say your amendment, Mr. Chair, because I want to craft that in. But certainly, I think that's the exact direction that I'd like to take it in as well. Really, this is not to get in the way of refurbishing or upgrading existing hotels. It's just to kind of seek to limit the proliferation of new hotel inventory.
And I think, and I think we all agree with that. We need to stop that proliferation of transient uses that's penetrating closer to where people live, that is affecting the quality of life of our residents, so much so that it's taking away opportunities, as you well have stated. Are there any other comments from the dais?
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Bott.
Tom, could you advise if this would affect any projects that are working their way through the system now?
It could potentially affect hotel projects that are currently pending at the city's planning board, historic preservation board, and design review board. As of right now, I'm aware of only one hotel project that is pending at the historic preservation board and planning board. And depending upon when an ordinance potentially requiring commission approval goes to the planning board and is transmitted, that could potentially affect that project. If that project receives approval from a land use board, then it would fall under zoning in progress, and this ordinance wouldn't be applicable to it. However, if they don't get their approval until after an ordinance like this is transmitted by the planning board, then potentially it could be impacted by it.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask a question of the director. And my intent isn't to derail that project, but it actually brings up a good point of where this would be wise, at what point in the process for this to take effect. Because I followed the discussions for this specific project, the hotel on 15th and Washington. I think we all kind of at different points said, man, what a great place for residential, but they're so far down their planning process. So many millions of dollars have been spent in that, they can't pivot and turn back. So to your expert opinion, Tom, where is the best process where we'd be able to sit there and interject? This isn't to sit there and say, no, this piece of property can't be developed, but it would say, well, yes, that's acceptable, but what could we do for something our city would truly want to embrace and see? And I don't want to essentially just come in at the end of the process and have this be a rubber stamp. I'd like to actually be able to interject ourselves in a part of the process where we can make that change, where we don't just get told, sorry, so many plans have been in progress, years of design, so much money has been spent, we can't pivot away from this.
And if I may interject there, perhaps what should happen is almost a discussion of the application before they go into the full review, to your point, because the whole regulatory review becomes so time-consuming, so expensive to a property owner, that then for the city commission to come in at the last minute and say, okay, everyone's chimed in, the RB has chimed in, the planning board has chimed in, or the HPB has chimed in, but, now you've wasted all your money because we're going to say, no, this can't move forward. It's better, and I think it's fair for us, perhaps earlier on in the process, at the beginning of the process, to offer that feedback before a stakeholder invests, millions, as you well stated.
Another question, if I may.
Yes, of course.
5/7 versus 6/7, why that threshold, not the higher?
That's a policy decision. If all LDR amendments require a 5/7 approval from the city commission, there are some threshold items that do require a 6/7 vote, such as any increase in FAR. To the extent that the commission wanted to institute a requirement for 6/7 approval of certain threshold hotel projects as defined by the commission, that certainly is within your purview.
And I'm going to recognize our city attorney who has his hand raised. Nick, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Magazine's comment about, what point should this ordinance apply to projects that are in the pipeline. I think the commission could consider to applicants who have filed an application for board review or at a minimum, an applicant that has received a notice to proceed, which means they're ready to be heard by a board. And then, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to respond to your point about allowing the commission to weigh in at an earlier stage. The only thing I would just caution is because these applications are quasi-judicial, you wouldn't be sitting in a legislative capacity. Your decisions have to be made based on technical review criteria, and so the way staff has proposed this item in the memo is you would get an advisory opinion of the planning board based on staff's analysis. I think that tees up the commission to make a decision that's likelier to withstand a challenge.
So what is your recommendation, Nick? What is your legal recommendation with the proposal before us?
I think the way the memo is drafted, where hotels, if you want to do this in certain areas, I know the sponsor has said for non-waterfront, then I think the way that staff has drafted the memo would work best, which is, first file a planning board application, the staff would analyze based on the criteria, the planning board would then make an advisory recommendation, and then the city commission would make the final decision.
This review criteria that's in our agenda, for example, under item 1, option 1. Whether the proposed warrant is consistent and compatible with a comprehensive plan. Does the comprehensive plan take into consideration housing availability in the city?
Not as it is directly affected by hotel. There's a separate housing element, but it doesn't take into consideration the potential impacts on hotel development.
And because I'm looking at some of the other review criteria, whether the warrant would create an isolated development unrelated to the adjacent neighborhood, that doesn't address housing. Whether the proposed warrant is out of scale with the needs of the neighborhood or the city, would that be related to housing?
That's more about the design of the actual hotel project.
All right, adversely impact living conditions. How do we incorporate here criteria, review criteria, that specifically speaks to its contribution to the availability of housing inventory in the city? Does it support? Does it adversely impact? I think because that is the whole purpose of this item. If the sponsor would allow me, that is the purpose of your item, correct?
Yes, and hearing the city attorney speak, thank you for weighing in on this, Dick. It's really not envisioned where if somebody can build as of right a hotel and a nice design comes and all the land use boards have come, us to sit there and say, well, no, you can't build that. It's really to get involved early on in the process and say, okay, you have this design for a hotel and you're allowed to build a 60-foot hotel on street XYZ. Collectively, we would like to provide you an incentive. Would you take 80 feet to go out and build residential? Something's being built there. We're all putting our heads together at this meeting. We'd like to come and say, would you consider this proposal? And essentially get the final product that we would need. So my worry is this isn't being done with the intent of just adding a regulatory burden. In fact, I wouldn't do anything but that. It's really to get involved early enough in the process where we could actually cause the project to pivot to something that we'd really like to see as a city, a final product.
And so, Mr. Attorney, taking that into consideration, here are my thoughts. You know, perhaps, because I do like option number one that's on the agenda. Clearly, option number one is at the end of the review process. And my question first would be, in option number one, could we add criteria that speaks to the availability of housing in the city? How, you know, this is, you know, adversely impact in any way the housing availability in the city, something like that. Is there a way we can incorporate that into this part of the item?
Yes, we could work with staff on criteria to address that.
Okay, all right, and now.
Isn't that subjective, though? Like,
In what way is it subjective? And in the future, if you want to be
sorry.
recognized, please do it through the chair, but you're recognized so that you can explain your question.
I apologize. Wouldn't a criteria like that be subjective, where the question is this adversely affecting the housing availability in the city? And the hotel applicant would say no, because anybody can build whatever they want, wherever they want, basically. You know, there are plenty of other places. And we would say, but we think that it should be here, not someplace else. We think.
Well, but if you're looking, for example, at properties zoned where you could have, you know, an area where you could be zoned for residential, you know, that's capacity, that's developable rights that could be used for residential development that's now being.
It's in areas where it could be either residential or commercial.
I think we need to, just anywhere, we need to be asking this question, you know, what is its potential impact on the availability of housing in the city?
Because if I may continue this line of discussion through the chair, you know, I think what we're trying to get to is we're full up on hotels, and we want to incentivize housing. And this seems complicated, and again, asking the stupid question out loud, but that's what I do.
There's no such thing as a stupid
Oh,
question.
but you haven't
Especially
heard this,
coming from you.
you haven't heard this one. If we're really serious about trying to put a halt on new hotel development and very excited about encouraging existing hotels to reimagine themselves and invest in their properties and upgrade their properties, it's our city, we get to make the rules. So can't we just say, you know what? We're not building any new hotels. However, if you have a hotel property and you would like to renovate it, upgrade it, upzone it, potentially even, we're very happy to figure out a way to make that happen. But right now, we have 800 rooms coming into the heart of the city. We've got high-end hotels coming online in a couple of years on oceanfront. The Deauville's going to come back with hotel capability. Ocean Terrace is going to come back with hotel capability. Do we need more hotels? I know this is like, you know.
Mr. Attorney, if I sense you want to chime in.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but this is part of a broader discussion that the Land Use Committee has had over the past several months, and you know, on March 5th, the committee had the policy discussion you're having now, which is which parts of the city do we think, you know, should no longer be eligible for hotels at all, and you adopted a motion, you know, making a recommendation to the city commission as to certain districts. So I think the idea with Commissioner Magazine's item is where you all feel that hotels should continue to be permitted, that they should go through this additional layer of review. So I think the idea is you make the policy decision at the legislative stage as to where you want hotels and where you don't, and then where you do want hotels, the city commission has the final word.
Yes.
And thank you for that, Mr. City Attorney. In option 2, number 3 and 4, those are really appealing to me, right? That is core to one of the reasons why we've actually lost residential population. We're not adding inventory, but we're actually having inventory taken offline of full-time residential in favor of residential usages. So I'd really like to incorporate number 3 and 4, where it's it would have to be raised to the city commission, any conversion of existing residential apartments into transient usage, or any new hotel development that's the conversion of existing commercial or residential apartments to transient usages. And I think we can then explore if there's areas where we want to see, similar to what Commissioner Bott said. I think I'd be in favor, or at least supportive of, in infill areas, right? Like, because if we're talking about on the water, I don't think that's where we're really adding full-time residential housing. So I'd be supportive of something like that. But even if we don't go full steam ahead with this, because like I said, it's not just wanting to add an extra regulatory process where we're essentially acting as a de facto rubber stamp at the end when it's too late to actually influence the project. Could we do something like we get an LTC, a letter to commission, for as soon as we get receive any application for a hotel? The commission is essentially alerted to that, and then if an individual commissioner wanted to essentially run that project down and, you know, work with the applicant team to essentially see if it could be steered into a direction that is more conducive or facilitative of the projects that we're talking about, they could essentially do so. So there, at least we'd be able to be a bit more involved from the beginning of the process. Tom, maybe?
I mean, we could certainly, if it's the direction of the commission, to update the commission on any new hotel developments that are submitted for review by the Design Review Historic Preservation Board or Planning Board. That's something that we could certainly provide to the commission.
I think it would be beneficial, okay? If we're creating a mechanism for approval, and especially if we go within certain thresholds. I think for example, you know, it's not just, you know, when we're seeing the conversion, but I think it's also when you're seeing new developments in areas that are zoned where you could have residential instead. So that should be a part of it if we go with option 2. But I think most importantly is having the conversation early on, beyond an LTC. I think perhaps just a simple discussion item, you know, on a commission agenda. They come, they present to the commission. This is what we intend to take to DRB or to HPB, and then ultimately to, you know, the planning board. I think we would be able to offer our input and provide our guidance as to the direction we would feel more comfortable seeing a project going early on, when an applicant would have the opportunity to still incorporate that in any meaningful, substantial way, as opposed to the very end of the process. That's what I think would be the most productive thing. But Commissioner Suarez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I think we have way too many hotels coming online, and we already have way too many hotels now. You know, I think going through an extra layer at the commission level is a good idea. Maybe not 5 7s. Maybe lower the threshold to 4 7s. And I think it should be. You know, I do agree that if it's waterfront, we're not going to get workforce housing on waterfront properties. But anything that's not waterfront, you know, every hotel that goes up is just another development that could have been residential, and it's taking away housing for people that want to live here. And so, look, I don't know how the committee is going to move on this, but I'm okay with as originally planned, where it's not nothing beachfront, and it goes through a review process through the commission. Or maybe we do this for the next 5 years to, I guess, to limit the amount of hotels that are going to be put online. And then we can always change that, but I think going through another layer is needed. I don't know, I don't really see an LTC, because once they've already applied for permits, it's too late. When there's nothing, it's just gonna waste our time reviewing it as a discussion item. I think if we want to see a city with not less hotels, but stopping hotels, let's make a decision today and say, look, we enough is enough. There's too many coming online, and let's start putting the brakes on.
Commissioner Bond, and then I think we should start framing a motion for this item.
I would not be in favor of lowering the voting requirement. Right now we have a pretty cohesive commission, but we've seen in the past when things aren't cohesive and it gets pretty messy. So I would encourage it to be what it needs to be to keep not unanimity, but cohesion in the views. I just feel like if we're trying to limit new hotels in places where new residential could go up instead, why don't we just do that directly?
I'm just gonna offer some feedback. I think we're not ready to move on an ordinance just yet. I think we need to do a little bit more crafting. I think one of the concerns that comes to mind is, I think, we're well positioned within our legislative authority to designate those areas of the city where we want to zone for hotels, and those areas of the city where we don't want to zone for hotels. We've been having that discussion in this committee now for a while, and as a result, we also have this item before us. My fear is at the same time, when you allow hotels in a certain zoning district, you need to have the right criteria, review criteria, and abide by those review criteria in order to say, okay, we're not going to approve a hotel here when we're sitting in a quasi-judicial capacity reviewing an application. Our decision needs to be based on an objective criteria and on a review criteria set in the code. And I think that still has to be flushed out a little bit more. So I think, Commissioner Magazine, you're getting supportive feedback here. I think we're all in the position that we want to see this extra layer of vetting. I think, to Commissioner Suarez's point, we need to start the dialogue early on in the review process. We can't wait to the final stage, but once it comes to that final stage, what does that review look like? What is the criteria for it? And then ultimately, the larger policy question for us as a city commission, what are those areas that we want to continue to see having hotel development as opposed to those that we don't want to continue seeing to have hotel development? Clearly, our oceanfront districts, certainly, that is part of the appeal of our city. And we've always had hotels there, and I think we will continue to embrace that. And similarly, I believe Collins Avenue is a part of that. But I think, we need to go in, and look at our, CD2, CD3 districts further inland along Alton Road and 41st Street and 5th Street and others, and see, do we want to continue to encourage hotel there as part of our zoning? With that, I'm going to open up the floor to any public comment before we continue this item. I see Mitch Novak has his hand raised. Mitch, welcome. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you again, and good evening, folks. I've been in the hotel business for 35 years. I can say with certainty the opening of the Good Time Hotel and the Moxie have not driven up hotel rates. I applaud and appreciate the spirit of this legislation. I don't know why you guys don't talk moratorium, especially knowing that we have thousands of hotel units in the pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Welcome.
Sorry about my address. I wasn't planning on. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sorry, I wasn't planning on offering any comments this afternoon. I'm here.
Your
I'm
name for the record, please.
Michael Larkin, 200 South Biscayne Boulevard, here representing the hotel operator owner at 15th and Washington that you all have been referencing from time to time in the last couple of hours. I'm in support of this legislation that Commissioner Suarez, Commissioner Magazine has brought forward. I think cities go through cycles, and I think we've been hotel heavy for a while. And, you know, I hear Peter Canavos in my ears when talking about the loss of residential population, and it's valid and it's true. However, as Commissioner Magazine pointed out, our particular client has invested millions of dollars so far in their redevelopment scheme, and we're in the process right now. So I would be asking you all for applicability clause on equitable grounds to protect that particular development. They did listen to the constructive criticism at the planning board that was leveled at the project, and as a result, they are totally retooling the project. They're bringing in larger hotel units, a banquet facility, meeting rooms, a very special spa concept from LA, which basically combines like 10 or 15 different wellness techniques within the same building. So they are really, and they're incorporating the Haddon Hall existing hotel property into it. So they're trying to do, and they're bringing in a world-renowned operator where I can't disclose yet. I haven't gotten client authority to disclose yet, but he's in the mix now too. And so I would just ask you all on equitable grounds to include this type of clause that's routine in this type of legislation.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Larkin. Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none on Zoom and none in person, I'm going to close the public hearing on this item, and I think the comment asks to an applicability clause so that those properties that are already through the review process are not treated differently in the middle of their process. I think certainly is worthy feedback to be incorporated. Yep, I think good feedback from the committee.
Yes. Would we like to make a motion, or do you think it's wise, given the appetite here, to continue this, fine tune it a bit, and come back at a land use in the future? Want to table this for a month? And
I would love for it to come back with a draft ordinance.
Yep.
A draft ordinance that also incorporates a review, a preliminary review at the beginning
Yes.
of the process.
Yep.
You know, as opposed to like, you know, and it's not a defined application with, you know, parking plans and all. It's just, you know, a preliminary review where the commission can offer feedback.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't know if there's any other feedback that we would want to give our colleague before this comes back next month. But it's very exciting. I'm so proud to be a co-sponsor of this because, again, we are advancing with important policies that improve the quality of life of our residents. And I applaud your leadership on this item. Thank you. With that, Mr. Director, let's introduce the next item.
Okay, and just to confirm with item number 6, we're going to continue this. I can try. I don't know if I'd be able to have an ordinance for the July 9th. If I can't, we can perhaps move it to September. But it would be a draft ordinance to have the city commission review at the beginning, and it would be basically for the non-waterfront infill hotel development, and we would include criteria pertaining to the impact on residential uses.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. If possible for July, if not July, then
Okay.
certainly for September. Thank
Okay,
you.
item number 7, review and consider repealing the 0.5 FAR incentive for hotel development in the CD2 Commercial Medium Intensity District.
Thank you, Mr. Director. This is an item I had introduced because I had concerns with the FAR incentive that we have for hotel development in our CD2 corridors. I believe we advanced legislation to repeal the FAR bonus for hotel development along Alton Road, as well as in the CD2 districts in North Beach, Normandy Isle, and along Collins Avenue. Pending before this body was the FAR incentive for hotel development on Washington Avenue. this was a part of the item that that at the time I wanted to bifurcate because I didn't feel comfortable just yet removing this FAR incentive for the Washington Avenue portion of the CD2 districts. I want to see, from my perspective, I want to see the new vision for Washington Avenue come to life. I want to see the opportunity for residential, for restaurants, for retail, for the new life of Washington Avenue to be developed and to come true before we take away opportunities for redevelopment of property in an area of our city that very much needs investment. And so at the moment, I don't favor us taking away this FAR incentive on Washington Avenue, but the body, it was a desire of the body to keep the item here. And I'll defer to my colleagues that had the interest to continue exploring this on Washington Avenue. So with that, I don't know who from the dais would like to speak on this item.
Go for it.
Commissioner
I'll
Suarez.
just-
Go ahead. All right, who wants to go first? I'm going to recognize the vice chair, and then we'll go from there.
You know, it seems, if we just spent how long on the prior item talking about how to lessen the impact of hotel development when we really need housing, and then to not get rid of the 0.5 FAR incentive for hotel development in the very areas where it's perfect for housing.
Yeah.
Seems counterintuitive.
And I'll respond to that. I think that's where, when we have our ability to review projects, we can certainly incentivize and we can certainly encourage the applicants not to do hotels, to do residential. But until we see that interest come forward, I personally have concerns taking away the opportunity to reimagine property that right now is sitting there empty or oftentimes sitting down in unappealing conditions. And that's my concern. I think the Moxie is an example of a hotel development that was done tastefully, that was done in a way that, you know, not only improved the facade and the activity of that block, but also improved the alleyway. And it's almost like the case study of a good example. I get concerned that until we see the new residential activity come into line, I don't want to shoot ourselves on the foot. But with that, let me just give our colleagues an opportunity. Commissioner Suarez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, the same discussion was had when this 0.5 FAR was given, right, as an incentive. And they didn't know if it was going to spur hotel development or not, but it certainly did. Like Commissioner Bott said, we had a whole 1 hour discussion on trying to, well, a lot of our discussions today have been about limiting hotel use. I certainly don't see why we should continue to allow this. If upgrading and enhancing a block because of a development incentive, let's give that bonus, let's give that FAR incentive to residential, and you'd have a much better effect on the surrounding neighborhood, because residential is the least intensive unit or intensive use of any kind. So I'm going to be in favor of repealing this 0.5 FAR increase for hotels.
Okay. Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you. I happen to love hotels. I spent my career working in the travel industry. I think they're great. However, at this time, we have a traffic situation here, and I am a firm believer that the traffic is because of the commuters, because we don't have people working in our different establishments that live here. So with that, I would be in favor of this item and happy to move it.
All right, there's a motion on the table, there's a second. I'm just gonna register my vote on this as a no, because I think we need every incentive on the table possible to promote the economic activity on Washington Avenue. And I think we're putting sufficient regulations in place to protect residential uses. We are increasing the incentives for residential use with the item that we considered earlier to increase the FAR to 3.0 for certain types of residential. I think that's significant. I think the review criteria that we're drafting that we discussed in the prior item is another safeguard. But in instituting all these safeguards, I just don't want to get ahead of the interests of promoting economic redevelopment in this area of our city that I think needs it. Before I close out this item and move on to the next item, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Mitch Nowick, you have your hand raised on Zoom. Welcome. Mitch, you're recognized. All right, I guess he perhaps, that was left over. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Wait, Alex.
Oh, I got Mitch is there. All right, welcome, Mitch.
The unmute prompt just appeared. To quote Commissioner Bott, this is counterintuitive, especially what you guys have been discussing mostly throughout this meeting. I would urge you to repeal the incentive for hotel development, especially along Washington Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. With that, let's go on to the next item.
And Mr. Chair, just to confirm, who was the maker of the motion?
It was moved by Vice Mayor Dominguez. It was seconded by Vice Chair Bott.
Okay, and I'm going to show that vote as 3-1
Yes.
to move this to the City Commission for referral to the Planning Board.
Thank you. With that, let's introduce item number 8.
Okay, item number 8 is review the city's current maximum development capacity for water, sewer, electrical, and other utilities and public facilities, and how to better use updated modeling and data for projected future demand to inform the city's planning and legislative efforts relating to development.
Commissioner Bott, this is your item. You're welcome to present on your item.
Well, on behalf of the mayor, whose item it is,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
that's okay, I'm a co-sponsor, but I'll actually let Tom tee this up, but the general gist of this is, you know, in the absence of an updated strategic plan, I don't think we've done one since 2019. There's development being foisted upon us by outside interests, and it is incumbent on us as stewards of the city to make sure that we can handle all this development that is coming our way, not just in roads, which we talk about the most, but in our infrastructure, dealing with water, sewer lines, et cetera. So I'll let you take it from there, Tom.
Okay, and for purposes of brevity, I'll go through this pretty quickly. As noted in the memo, any new developments are guided by the concurrency requirements in Chapter 163 of Florida statutes, and those are reflected in our comprehensive plan. However, the statute does not mandate level of service standards for things like electricity or gas, as those are provided by private entities that maintain their own requirements. To the best of our knowledge, we do not foresee a gap in available electricity or gas from any of the utilities. Typically, FP&L will stay on top of expanding substations and other infrastructure to address that. My staff did work very closely with the Public Works Department, Joe Gomez and his staff, and put together some pretty good data regarding our water and sewer capacities. The Public Works Department is involved right now in updating our water and sewer master plans, as well as future analysis for things like potable water, sanitary sewer, and water pressure. From what we've been able to tell, there appears that we do have capacity for water and sewer. That's not to say that additional infrastructure improvements will not be needed. They certainly will be as the future rolls around. But we from what we can tell, our capacity looks good now. If there's any specific questions on any of the data that's been put together here, I can certainly answer that. Joe Gomez from the Public Works Department is here. He could answer that as well.
Commissioner Bond.
I do have a quick question. While we say that we do have the capacity and as we evolve into our upgraded infrastructure, you know, it's a 20-year plan, 20-plus year plan, and we've got developments coming online right now. And, you know, in the town center North Beach, we've got 13 projects coming on in an 8x6 block radius, plus 3,000 more units at North Bay Village, which I know we have no control over, but, you know, everything flows. And so I don't want us to be in a situation like that again. And what happens when development projects come online faster than the upgraded infrastructure?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Honorable Commissioners. Joe Gomez, Public Works Director. Commissioner, Vice Chair, that's a great question. We typically require developers when they come to Public Works through the development process, a hydraulic model. So they'll make a request. Our team will work with them. We'll perform the hydraulic model through our consultant, and then we determine if there's a capacity issue, localized capacity issue. Typically, if it requires upgrades, and we're not quite ready there to bring those upgrades online, then that would be the responsibility of the developer.
If I may, Chair.
Yes, you're recognized.
But so what happens, the developer looks at their immediate project, but if they're one of 13 plus 3,000 units just across the bridge, nobody's looking at that. I mean, there's a public forum last week about a project being contemplated for the outer reaches of Normandy Isle, and some of the residents said, well, what about the traffic coming from 3,000 units, you know, just across the bridge? And they said, oh, we hadn't really thought about that, which is not great, you know, because we're the ones left holding the bag. We can't control what happens across our borders.
Correct.
In another city, but at the same time, I don't believe it to be sufficient to just look at the impact that one project is going to have on, you know, as a silo, because they would exist in an entire environment. And so how is that contemplated? Or is there something we can do to make that better?
Yes, and through our work in Public Works also, we do our upgrades to our stormwater master plan. We looked at it in 2019. We're looking at an update to the to the water and sewer master plan for this coming budget cycle, because we know that the requirements in our infrastructure are not quite, you know, we have some needs. So as we do that, we look at the overall system and determine where the critical points are where we would need to invest our money.
But if we're rearranging our 20-year plan because of developer strains, shouldn't it be on the shoulders of the developers to underwrite those projects?
It's a combination, because you have to understand that a lot of our system already is, it's an older, aging infrastructure. So regardless of whether you have 5,000 or 10,000 units coming on, there are already needs that have to be done in order to be able to sustain
what's been built ever since the creation of the system.
So it's a balancing act, and of course, through the development process, there are requirements that are imposed upon the developer in order to be able to, for example, if the model determines that their development or developments are going to impact the system, or the system can't handle it, at that point, that would be on the burden of the developer to do those improvements.
And do when a developer does his or her modeling, do they take into account the things that are coming online down the road, like in the next year or two from where they are?
When the hydraulic model is done, it looks at not just at that development, but it also looks at the surrounding area in terms of other potential, because that's all part of the planning process, where we know in advance what areas are zoned for a particular type of usage, so that's already accounted for.
Is there a motion on the table on this item?
Yes, I'll make a motion.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second? Second. All right, it's been probably moved and second, and this is to support the study that is being proposed as part of this item. Is that correct, Mr. Director?
That's correct.
All right. With that, this show is adopted by acclamation. Since we've concluded our priority items on the agenda, I'm going to proceed with item number 22, which I'm going to take out of order. Mr. Director, we could introduce the item.
Sure. Item number 22 is a discussion of potential amendments to the land development regulations of the city code and the city comprehensive plan regarding allowable uses and development regulations within the 40th Street residential single-family overlay only applicable to religious institutions.
Thank you. With that, this is an item that was placed on the agenda by Mayor Minor. The mayor's office requested that this item be placed on today's agenda. The mayor's not present to present on his item, but I believe they are individuals who are interested in this item that would like to make a presentation. Mr. Director, I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to present on this item before we recognize the speakers.
No, this is basically a discussion item where a property owner within the overlay has a specific type of use that would require some amendments to the land development regulations in the comprehensive plan. I believe that they could probably explain in better detail, so I will defer to them.
All right, Rabbi Stillerman, welcome. Please approach the podium. How much time would you need for your presentation?
2 minutes.
2 minutes? You're welcome to do your presentation, Rabbi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good evening, actually. It started as afternoon. There's a well-known phrase that Kevin Costner used in the 1989 film Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come. In Yehudi's case, they're already coming. Now we just have to build it. My name is Rabbi Shlomo Stillerman. I'm the founder and CEO of Yehudi, a Jewish outreach organization that provides safe and nurturing environments for Jews to be Jewish. We currently have 9 Yehudi homes in Florida, 5 of which are located on college campuses in Miami, Orlando, Tallahassee, Gainesville, and Tampa. The other 4 Yehudi homes are located in South Florida, serving the millennial communities. Here in Miami Beach, the Yehudi home is located on 40th Street between Royal Palm and Prairie in the religious overlay area. College students from FIU, UM, and Nova, as well as hundreds of young professionals from the immediate and surrounding areas, come to Yehudi to learn Jewish values and to learn Jewish wisdom. We have outgrown our current home. Almost all of our classes, programs, and events are now being held outside in our large backyard. It was nice in January and February, but imagine trying to listen to classes about Judaism in 90-degree summer heat. Since October 7th, the need to provide for our community has become even more pressing. One, because attendances have more than doubled for many of our programs. And 2, sadly, it's simply not safe to have large gatherings of Jewish people out in the open on a regular basis. We need a Yehudi home now. Time is of the essence. We have succeeded in giving the youth of our community a place to learn more about their rich Jewish heritage, a place to feel proud to be Jewish. However, we are failing to give them a place where they can feel safe. We are failing to give them a feeling of security that they so rightly deserve. We are failing to provide our young Jewish community a place to be a young Jewish community. The solution is a new Yehudi home large enough to accommodate our growing community. Our donor base of over 10,000 donors is willing and able to put up the resources to build it. The resources are here. The people, they have come. We just need to build it. The only thing we need now is your partnership. I humbly ask from the commissioners here today to please partner with me to build a Yehudi home for our community where young Jews can come, learn, be proud, and be Jewish. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Director, since we don't have an ordinance before us, what is this item before us? What is it asking from us? What type of feedback does the administration need from this committee?
So, and I'll let Rabbi Stillerman fill in any blanks that I may miss, as well as his architect. But in previous meetings that we've had with Rabbi Stillerman and his architect, what they desire to do is to expand upon the current regulations that are set forth in the LDRs regarding religious institutions in the 40th Street overlay. Currently, the regulations allow for existing single-family homes to be converted to religious institutions, and under the definition of religious institution, that would include things like accessory learning centers and accessory community rooms. With the mission of the Yehudi, they need significantly more space, and they would need to basically exceed the current land development regulation limits that exist for single-family homes in the
What does that
RS4
mean? Does
district.
that mean changes to the setbacks, lot
Correct.
coverage?
Under
Walk
the-
us specifically through the bullet
Yeah.
points of what it is that is needed.
So under the 40th Street religious overlay, although religious institution uses are permitted in single-family homes through the conditional use process, the actual physical development of the home still has to comply with all of the RS4 single-family regulations. And in order for the Yehudi to be able to operate effectively, they would need some relief from a number of those existing land development regulations. And those would include the limit on maximum lot aggregation so that they can aggregate up to 3 single-family lots. They would need relief from current minimum setback requirements and minimum or maximum lot coverage requirements. They would need an expansion or increase in allowable unit size. They would also need an expansion of allowable height exceptions and usable roof area. They would need modifications to minimum parking requirements. And they would also need to be able to introduce dormitory as an allowable use, as well as potentially an expanded school as an allowable use within the overlay.
Has your department met with the interested party to determine, how much are the minimum setbacks, the reduction in the setbacks, or the changes in the lot aggregation, or in the lot coverage? I know you just mentioned allow up to 3 lots of aggregation, but do we have the information as to the setbacks and the lot coverage and the height changes that would be necessary?
We don't have the specific information. We've had some preliminary meetings with the architect with a draft site plan and draft elevations. However, in order to determine exactly what types of modifications to the code would be needed, we would need to see a more detailed set of plans before we could actually draft an ordinance.
And that's where I think, I think certainly, I think the city has always been very, very inclined and positioned to supporting the 40th Street overlay, the mission of the 40th Street overlay, and the institutions that have made the 40th Street overlay a beautiful community that it is, as well as preserving the residential character of the 40th Street overlay and acknowledging its important role as a buffer from the commercial activity on 41st Street and protecting the residential neighborhood to the south. I'd be interested in having our planning department sit down with Yehudi, come back with a draft ordinance that's placed on the agenda under the proper provisions of the residents' rights to know, so that the residents of the area are well aware of what's being proposed on the agenda. I think visuals are always incredibly helpful, and including those as part of the agenda item and attached to any proposed ordinance would certainly be very helpful. I noticed on the memorandum that there was references to dormitories and usable rooftop. My question would be, number one, is the rooftop absolutely necessary? That would be, a question that I have. But beyond that, I believe anything like the rooftop or the dormitory uses should be conditional uses, should not be main uses of this district. I think that any property that would be interested in having this type of use should apply for a conditional use permit, so that the neighbors receive proper notice and they're able to participate in the approval process. If there are any concerns about operations, about hours, about deliveries, about anything, that it could be properly vetted through a conditional use process. And it's very different, a dormitory, than some of the other subjects we've been discussing before, because this is, I think, what we need to differentiate here. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom. This would be a dormitory that's ancillary to a religious use. Is that correct?
That's my understanding of how how that would operate, correct? It would be part and parcel of the actual function of the operation.
Okay. With that, is there any comments from the dais on this item? Commissioner Dominguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. So I've met with Rabbi Stillerman a couple times on this. Last year, we had an extensive meeting with Tom and other members of the city administration where we went through the plan. And one of the things that I mentioned was to reach out to the neighborhood association, which I know that the rabbi has done multiple times. He hasn't received feedback in return because I've been copied on the emails, but he has made an attempt to do so. And there are drawings of the project, so I'm sure in a year's time it's probably changed a little bit. One comment that I will make is that for me, having zero parking is not great. There should be some parking for staff that works there and any repair people that are going to come, so that those folks aren't then parking in the neighbors' yards when they're fixing the air conditioning or doing other things of that nature. But it's a good project. I know you want to be a good neighbor, and those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from the dais? Yeah. Commissioner Bond, you're recognized.
Thank you. I just met Rabbi Stillerman this morning and had a good conversation about this. I'm not sure where the disconnect was between the neighborhood association and the rabbi, but I connected them all on email so that there can be outreach. I mean, you and I, we all care.
I did that too.
Yeah.
And I called her.
So I, hopefully with all of us encouraging that outreach both ways, that'll happen. I think it's unusual to come back with an ordinance about something when you don't have a lot of information. And because this is a big deal to you guys and to the neighborhood and to the future use of that buffer zone between commercial and residential, I would suggest that it might be useful to sort of deconstruct the project in a way and say, this is what we're trying to accomplish. What is the least impactful way we can do that? For instance, you and I talked a lot about the use of a roof deck and why you need that additional space. But perhaps if you could aggregate an additional lot, you wouldn't need to have an activated roof deck, and that might be a workaround because it could give you the space to build a courtyard or whatever, however it could happen. So I would actually, before we come back with an ordinance, I would encourage to have a conversation about what would need to be tweaked in order to accomplish what you need to for the organization, right? So if it's additional space for classrooms and meetings and events, or if it's additional dormitories, or what that might be, what are some other ways to do that that might not be as intrusive, if you will, into the neighborhood fabric? And then have a conversation about what that would look like from an ordinance perspective. And I really, you know, as you and I discussed, I was the former president of Miami Beach United, and residents' right to know is one of the most important thing that organization did, and it was with late Commissioner Mark Samuelin who really championed that. And so I'm not comfortable until there is a meeting with the residents in the neighborhood, and if that means, you know, we have to bring everybody into City Hall and grab them by the scruff of their necks and say, okay, we're going to sit down and have this chat together so you can all collectively make informed decisions. I think that's what needs to happen. I'm very excited to see how this project moves forward, and eager to see it do so in a way that works for everybody.
And Commissioner Bond, I agree in a lot of what you've mentioned, except the part about the ordinance. I think a lot of these concepts, it's important to, like, we might see a visual, we might see concepts of something, but I think not until we start seeing what does this translate in terms of policy that we can start amending and changing along the process of conversing with the neighbors, with the association, or with other affected parties. You know, the ordinance becomes, a draft ordinance becomes important in that. And we can have that draft ordinance come back to this land use committee to be further vetted. But I think we need to see, you know, what is the minimum setback that they're asking for? What is the lot coverage? The one thing I would say is that any rooftop activations, and I was mentioning this to the rabbi, you know, the underlying zoning here is residential, single family. That is the underlying zoning. Rooftop activations are very inconsistent with residential, single-family zoning, and we need to protect the surrounding neighbors. We owe it to them. They've placed their trust in us to represent them, to protect them, and we need to do that. And so, you know, I think that's important. But I believe we need an ordinance, a draft ordinance that we can start, you know, from which we can start a conversation. Otherwise, these concepts, you know, they're pictures, they're ideas, but we have nothing that we're working off of.
If I may.
Yes, of course.
So I guess what I was suggesting was to have something more concrete than just pictures and ideas. But if, you know, if the goal is to accomplish X, Y, and Z, what are the ways that X, Y, and Z could be accomplished? And so that might be a conversation that Tom and his staff have with you and your architect. And so why would we draft an ordinance until we know what kind of workarounds might be palatable? I mean, Tom might have something up his sleeve that nobody's contemplated, like, oh, that would solve it perfectly. That's great. Let's do that. So the ordinance would have that version instead of, you know, I don't know what we're drafting at this point until.
Well, and we're not drafting the ordinance. I mean, this is the mayor's item. I had asked the mayor to be present here today because certainly I don't want us to be framing something that does not align with his vision. I think if anything, what should happen is that, you know, the planning department needs to work with the mayor's office, because this is ultimately the mayor's item, and an ordinance should only come forward once and if the mayor, you know, feels comfortable with an item that, you know, is ready to be presented here with his name attached to it.
Here, meaning back here?
Yes,
Okay.
at the land use committee. Are there any other comments from this committee? Commissioner Suarez, any feedback on this item?
Generally, I'm very supportive. I think my colleagues are right. We need to have something tangible, because the unintended consequence would be, you know, what if a developer somehow found a loophole in what we're basically giving carte blanche to? So we just need to be very careful about what you need, and I'm assuming we'll be more than happy to accommodate for for your plan, which seems that we're all in agreement with. But we need something a little bit more concrete.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Commissioner Suarez, did you just talk about unintended consequences? Can we record this moment in history?
7:03 p.m. on June 10th, yes. With that, I'm going to open up the floor to public comment. Are there members of the public present that wish to speak on this item? I see on Zoom Wayne Roberts has his hand raised. Wayne, welcome. You're recognized to speak.
Thank you very much, Alex. My issue is that I love religious institutions. I think, that's what makes America great. My concern is like converting single family areas into commercial areas is not really conducive to making Miami Beach better in the long term. The density of converting single family homes. And I think, religious institutions provide a benefit to the community greater than the tax loss, but you're talking about 3 homes that probably add, 50,000 or more in tax revenue that is going to be evaporated annually. It's a very tough call. I don't understand why the temple or the religious institution can't build their concept on existing commercial property that would allow for such development already. We have plenty of space, where, it's kind of blighted, the commercial spaces in Miami Beach, and a new facility would be great there. So I don't like changing zoning laws, especially in single family. And, I would do it with great hesitation. And I respect the rabbi and his goals. I don't know if this is the right direction for Miami Beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing no other, sir, yes, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Manny Sinilowski. I'm an architect in private practice. Delighted to be here. Not here often, but when I come, it's really quite an immersive experience. It's actually a lot of fun. Thank you for all your comments, for all your care. I just wanted to make sure that it's okay for us to maybe work with staff to develop and be responsive to the comments that we heard tonight.
Yes.
Because we believe that we can be. We believe that we can meet the program requirements of Yehudi and at the same time meet the concerns that you've raised tonight, which are concerns that we have also relative to the integrity of the community as it exists and how we don't impact adversely that community. So given that opportunity, if staff would allow us to, we'd be happy to meet with staff and together develop a modification, if you will, to the current regulations that would do all of the above. And we think we can all win, and the community can win also. Thank you.
Thank you. The one thing I would also want to make sure, and I would love feedback from this committee on, rarely do we change our residential single-family zoning in this way. We usually take a more conservative approach of, being more protective of the residents' quality of life, of protecting the people who live in the immediate abutting area. And so what I would want to make sure, because this is specifically on residential zoning, is that once we have an item that, an ordinance that the mayor feels comfortable with to bring back to the committee, that we do have either somehow this noticed through residents' right to know, or perhaps a separate charrette with the neighborhood on it. I just want to make sure that the neighborhood is aware, that the neighborhood feels respected, which I know is your intent as well. I know that you're approaching this with the best of intentions, and with a desire to protect the residents and the quality of life of the abutting neighborhood while continuing to advance with your mission, which is a beautiful mission. And so that's the only other comment that I would like to place here. Another aspects of it and the reason why I mentioned a charrette is because since this does involve an increase in unit size, had it not been a residential zoning district, the process for that would involve quite a robust and extensive public outreach process, a number of community forums. This being a residential zoning district, it doesn't require that robust outreach, but I do think we do owe it to our constituents in the neighborhood to allow them the opportunity to have a charrette, for you to hear from them, and for them to learn about your vision for this unique piece of property within the overlay.
Can I have
Yes,
3
Rabbi,
points?
yes.
3 points. Commissioner Dominguez, to address your point about the parking, so Manny did include some service parking for when that's needed, so that is on the west side of the building, so that's there, but we could definitely look into more parking. Number 2, to address what the gentleman from Zoom, Mr. Roberts, his points were, if you're still there in cyber world. So I just wanted to clarify that the currently the lots are being used as we speak for religious institutions. We're not asking to change that. That is its current use. The 3 lots are already all tax exempt, and we're not requesting any tax change law. The activity is there. What we're asking is just to try to control it. Like, the people are coming, the students are coming in mass. And as for why we want to do it in the heart of Miami Beach, that is integral to the organization's mission. Yehudi is not about classroom education, it's about experiential education. It's about immersive experiences. And for us to take our Jewish youth and bring them into a beautiful, beautiful community, a beautiful Jewish community like Miami Beach, is integral to the success of our mission. To bring them into the Miami Beach community, to spend a Shabbos, to spend an extended weekend, to meet some of the incredible people, some of our supporters, some of our philanthropists, and just the regular people are really remarkable in Miami Beach. It's not something that we could accomplish if we were on, Collins Avenue. It's not something we could accomplish in a commercial road. We need our students to come and live with the people and spend time with the good citizens and residents of Miami Beach. And the third point I just wanted to clarify was in Commissioner Bott, in terms of the points you raised, is that I'm a resident of Miami Beach, and most of my friends are residents of Miami Beach. If Mr. PJ is still up there, if you could show an image that Manny, this is Manny's drawing for how we imagined 40th Street to look. And it's important for us to have the character of a residential area. This is what we came up with. If we need to redesign it, we'll redesign it. If we need to redesign it again, we're going to. It is important for us to maintain that residential character of the neighborhood, and we do hope to get it right. We'll get it right.
And I think that's where the engagement with the neighborhood would be important, and with planning as well, because I think, this abuts a single-family residential neighborhood. I think a lot of people would see that image, perhaps be a little bit intimidated by the massing of that image. They would perhaps not see that as consistent with residential. And that's where conversations, your conversations with the neighborhood, so that you can find that balance and that happy medium where both interests can advance in a neighborly way would be good. And I think I echo the comments of my colleagues for there to be conversation, two-way conversation with the neighborhood association on this matter.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, any other comments on this item? Any other feedback that staff needs from us on this?
So this, what I believe that the direction would be to continue the item to the July meeting, and then we can meet with Mr. Stanilovsky and Rabbi Stillerman. And then if a draft ordinance can be put together as approved by the mayor in time for July, we can bring that. If it can't, we could move it to September.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that whatever item appears on this agenda as a draft ordinance is something that the mayor, since the mayor doesn't sit in the committee, and I know his time is limited to attend the committee meetings, I just want to make sure whatever ends up being placed on the agenda as a draft ordinance, is something that the mayor feels comfortable with, that we have whatever renderings that are associated with it that can be included with the item, and that the appropriate right-to-know procedures are followed, proper notice to the neighborhood associations, et cetera. All right?
Okay, we're good, by
Awesome.
acclamation.
By acclamation, unless we can show this done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Colleagues, there's, I see the staff we have Amy Knowles here. I don't know if we could extend the meeting for a few more minutes to 7:30, let's say, because there are two other items that I did agree to, the two.
Fine. I move it for 2 items.
For 2 items. And I think they should be, I hope it should be relatively easy. Item number 20 and 21. Tom, if we could just introduce those 2 items. 'Cause I do feel we can probably dispense with them pretty quickly.
Sure, do you want me to just go ahead and read both into the record, and then we can discuss both together? Or one at a time?
I think let's take them one at a time, and colleagues, we have one other item, which I hope it could be relatively, not controversial, which would be the Collins Canal historic designation. Do we feel that, that would be something we could just consider before the end of the meeting today?
Could do the Canopy Park one too. Is it super quick?
Okay, so, all right, so the 2 palm tree items, if our colleagues agree, 2 palm tree items, the Collins Canal item, and which was the other item, Commissioner Bond? Canopy Park, which is item,
Canopy Park, I believe, is item 24, but let me confirm.
all right,
that.
and I think these could be pretty.
23, Canopy Park is item 23.
23, I think, I don't see it here.
What's this one? Canopy Park?
Okay.
It's basically.
Yeah, okay. I think we could do these quickly. All right, so Tom, let's introduce the mayor's 2 items. We can take them separately. Let's start with item number 20.
Okay, Mr. Chair, item number 20 is amend certain landscape requirements in Chapter 126 of the City Code relating to palm trees to permit palms to count toward the minimum number of street trees.
Amy, I'll recognize you to present this item.
Sure, and good evening, Chair and Vice Chair and committee members. This item is actually falls under Chapter 126 under the Planning Department. This is an item of the mayor's that has been introduced for some time. It was introduced, I believe, in 2021, so that palm trees could be used instead of shade trees as part of street trees. And what this does is allow palm trees to be used. They can currently be used, however, they don't count as the minimum number. And that is because some years ago, our code was changed to be more protective and offer more shade in comparison to, example, Miami-Dade County, where they do allow palms and they have a much more distance between trees. So just introducing the item here, and this isn't something as administration we do recommend, because it really kind of goes against our canopy goals to increase shade. So that's the item before you.
Okay, so our code requires canopy trees, and this would be to allow for palm trees to count towards the minimum number of these shade trees our code requires.
That's correct.
So this would be a 1-to-1. So where you would have a shade tree, one palm tree could meet that minimum requirement.
I believe so. And I don't know if Tom wanted to add because he kind
Tom,
of administers
sure,
this
simply.
portion.
I will read the exact amendment. Currently, the code says that palms shall not count towards the required number of street trees. That's the current regulation. The proposed regulation would be that palms which meet the requirements of this paragraph shall count as a required street tree on the basis of one palm per tree. So it
Okay.
would be a 1-per-1 if they meet the height requirements.
I am generally okay with that, except I think that we need to, what I would recommend, and I welcome the feedback of the committee, is that it shouldn't be 1-to-1. I think we can all agree that palms should count towards a minimum number of trees, but I don't think it's fair to say that one palm tree would be the same as one shade tree. So what I would like the sponsor to do, working with the appropriate staff over at the Office of Resiliency and the Planning Department, is to determine what would be the appropriate formula of how many palms, in my opinion, should be at least, 2 or 3 palms per shade tree. Because that to me would seem more consistent with the intent, but I welcome the feedback of my colleagues.
I agreed, I'd move that.
Yeah, I was thinking 2-to-1, so, yeah.
All right, so with that, any additional feedback? With that, seeing no members of the public with their hands raised, no one approaching the podium, I'm going to close the public hearing, and we can show this adopted by acclamation.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, just for clarity purposes, this was a dual referral, so we will take that recommendation to the planning board as part of the
Right,
ordinance.
2 palm trees per 1 tree.
Got it.
Thank you. With that, let's introduce the next item.
Sure, the next item is.
Mr. Director, the director needs to introduce the item.
Sorry about that. Item number 21 is a discussion regarding proposed amendments to Chapter 46 of the City Code pertaining to heritage tree designation.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Through the chair. So this item began back in 2021 as well, and the item proposes amendments to Chapter 46 of the City Code pertaining to heritage trees. It actually introduces the concept of designating, allowing palms to be considered heritage trees. So heritage trees are defined and designated through our code as an individual tree or a group of trees with a unique value, which are considered irreplaceable. The major criteria for heritage tree designation are age, rarity, and size. Aesthetics, botanical and ecological, and historical value are also considered. So the majority of these type of trees are found in parks and green spaces, public properties, and they're really not replaceable. So from the administration's perspective, this would be a challenge because palms are highly replaceable in general, and there could also be a fiscal impact as we do commit to subsidize $750 of actual trimming and pruning for a heritage tree once it's designated.
Amy, who could designate a tree? Like, for example, there's a heritage palm tree in a public right of way. Who could designate who could start the process to designate a palm tree as a heritage palm tree?
So a private property owner can submit to do that, as well as.
Could that potentially kill an infrastructure project?
It could, because they have the highest level of protections of trees. So they really are not allowed to be removed unless there is an incredible life and safety concern. They're highly protected from development.
So a private property owner could potentially designate a tree that doesn't belong to them, or initiate the process to designate a tree that doesn't belong to them, and then get in the way of the advancement of an important infrastructure project that's necessary for the good of the public.
Well, I would say that private property owners have the ability to designate private property heritage trees, though that application would come to me, and it would need a lot of backup information from certified arborists. So that's on the private property side.
On the public property?
On the public property side, we could also do that ourselves. As a city, we could designate a property.
Can a private property owner start the process to designate a tree, a palm tree, in the public right of way?
I would have to check the code very carefully, but I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay, all right. With that, is there any comments from the dais on this item? I think I would want some more information on this, because I would want some clarity as to who could initiate a designation and potential unintended consequences that this could have on infrastructure improvements such as our improvements to stormwater and drainage and our water and sewer systems. And so I would just want to have the clarity that this, that anyone just couldn't start the designation of a public palm tree and now essentially kill a project that we need to advance on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little leery of having it be easier to designate a palm tree than it is an actual historic structure. Like, I think that,
Would you like to make a motion?
yeah, I don't want.
Commissioner Dominguez, you're recognized.
So I would move to close this item out and then have the Chief Resilience Officer send an LTC with answering your questions. And then if the sponsor wants to bring it back, they can. This is from 2021.
Yes. How about, out of courtesy, why don't we defer this item in the event, we can give the opportunity for more information to be provided to us. Because if an LTC is provided with an answer, I just don't want us to, go through the process of creating more paperwork through a referral. So why don't we defer this to September?
I think through the chair, I did confirm that a, private property owner cannot go ahead and designate that on public property.
Okay, with that, is there a motion then on the table, since we have the answer that we were gonna wait for? We have the answer that we needed, so is there a motion on the table?
I move to close this out.
There's a motion on the table to close this out. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, are we closing this out by acclamation? By acclamation, showed this item closed out. The next item, let's see here. I agreed to, okay, let's do Collins Canal number 11, Mr. Director.
Okay, Mr. Chair, item number 11 is discuss the proposed Collins Canal Historic Designation.
Okay, who will be presenting on this item?
I can present on behalf of the administration, Mr. Chair. Basically, for brevity purposes, the Collins Canal designation process started about 2 years ago in April of 2022 at the direction of the Historic Preservation Board. And the Collins Canal was recommended for designation by the Historic Preservation Board. The ordinance was transmitted with a favorable recommendation by the Planning Board, and it was approved at first reading by the City Commission on February 21st. At second reading on April 3rd, the City Commission but referred the proposed designation back to the Land Use Committee for additional input and discussion prior to second reading, which is tentatively set for July 24th, 2024.
Thank you, Tom. And this is an item that has gone through the Historic Preservation Board as well. It was
That's
initiated
correct.
by the Historic Preservation Board, and we all also have a copy of some background that Danny Summers from the Mayor's Office has been gracious to share with us. He's a historian. In addition to being the mayor's senior policy advisor, he shared some great feedback that I love to be incorporated with the record of this item. I think that, it only makes sense for us, to support the designation, considering, it is the oldest still existing built structure in the city of Miami Beach, and it certainly is appropriate to do it as we look at everything having to do with preserving our waterways and improving our waterways and the opportunities it could present for grants to improve the cleanliness and the restoration of these bodies of water. And so I don't know if there's any comments from. Yeah. Commissioner Dominguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. I know that the staff has done a lot of work on this research, and so has the Miami Design Preservation League, and I'd like to
Yes.
move the item.
Okay, the item is properly moved. Is
I'll
there a
second.
second? A second. We can open up the public hearing for public comment. Are there members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Daniel, welcome. You're recognized.
I promise to be brief. Thank you, Commissioners. Daniel Serraldo with
You
Miami
turn on the
Design-
mic.
Oh,
There you go.
okay. Thank you, PJ. Daniel Serraldo with Miami Design Preservation League. First of all, I want to thank the commission. I know that there have been questions from the public, and I want to work to address any of those, and I'll continue reaching out to the particular HOA that has some concerns. But I did want to mention that during this process, there were 2,000 mail notices sent out to all the property owners within 375 feet, and 0 letters of opposition were received. I think there was some maybe misunderstanding that this would apply to structures like buildings, but it definitely does not. I want to make that clear on the record. And we just had a great proclamation that you all signed. I wanted to thank you all for doing that. And it was presented to the great-great-grandson of John Collins over on Friday. And so we're very excited, hopefully, to move this along and have a great thing to celebrate. So thanks for your support.
Thank you. Mitch Novick, you're recognized to speak on this item.
Hey, good evening, folks. I'm in support of this item. I once served as chairman of the HP board way back in 2001 to 2006. I thought we had approved a designation way back then when we also designated the Flagler Memorial, the Great Spirit along Pine Tree Drive, the obelisks on 28th Street. And I might just have to, and I'm surprised I haven't, revert to the old video which I had saved. But this is a no-brainer, and I hope this passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tom, I just want to put for the record, could you confirm that the approval of this item will not affect the application of anyone wanting to improve their seawalls or do any dock improvements, that this item should not interfere with that?
That's correct, because it doesn't affect private property.
It does not affect private properties at all. So the items have been properly moved by Commissioner Dominguez, seconded by Commissioner Bond. Can we show this by acclamation adopted? By acclamation, this item is adopted. With that, we had the item related to Canopy Park. Which item number is that, Mr. Director?
That is item number 23, and if you want to
Read that
read
into
into
the record, please.
This is to discuss and consider the potential rezoning and reclassification of the future land use map of Canopy Park at 701 West Avenue to reflect the city's ownership and use of the property as a park.
Thank you. Commissioner Bond, you're recognized to present your item.
Thank you. So the British have a great saying about when you want to make sure something is going to go the way you want it to is using belt and braces, so belt and suspenders. So this is a zoning version of that. This is already de facto what this land is to be used for, but we just want to clean up so there's no doubt in the future if the commission goes completely haywire and nobody's here to remember anything, just make sure that this is classified as GU.
Yep. And I'll second your motion.
Thank you.
And it's similar, in fact, to what I'm trying to get done with Pride Park, except with Pride Park, it's a little bit more complicated.
Right.
Here, it's a little bit more streamlined,
Yep.
but Pride Park, we have a certain other issues. Tom, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just, I need some direction on what the committee recommends as far as the future land use category. The zoning will be GU, but we had identified 2 potential options for the future land use category. One would be public facility governmental uses, which is PF, or it could be recreation and open space, including waterways, which is ROS.
And it's an ROS, for example, Loomis Park, Flamingo Park.
Yes.
Belle Isle Park, they're all ROS, is that correct?
That's correct.
And why would we treat
Yeah.
this any differently?
You could. We just wanted to give you that option in case there was ever a future governmental use that you wanted to do. But if the intention is for this to remain recreation and open space, including waterways in perpetuity, ROS would be perfectly fine.
Commissioner Vaughn, I'll be happy to second your item as amended for ROS.
I'm happy to do it with ROS.
And lastly, would the motion include the proposed text amendment regarding unified development sites that we had included in the memo?
Yes, and are there any FAR implications with a unified development site?
Not with this text amendment, no. That's what this text amendment addresses.
With that, are there members of the public here to speak on this item? Any members of the public on Zoom? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can we show this item adopted by acclamation? Yes. By acclamation, this item is adopted. And then I believe the last item that we have before us is item number 16. Mr. Director, let's read that into the record.
Okay. Item number 16 is consider adopting a building energy benchmarking ordinance for greenhouse gas emissions.
All right, Commissioner Dominguez, this is your item. You're welcome to present your item.
Thank you. I had picked this up as a motion from the Sustainability Committee, and I will let Amy Knowles tee it up.
Sure. Well, hello again. This item was heard back in March, where I did a nice presentation of what energy benchmarking is and some of the environmental and economic benefits. So we're back again today with some additional information. We've attached a draft ordinance for consideration that still needs to be developed more. We've developed an estimate of the software costs, an analysis of county data in terms of our building sizes, and we have identified some program resources and needs. So just as a refresher, this program is an incredible resource to buildings because it gives them information, a full report about their whole building energy use that they can utilize as owners and managers and focus on improvements. And they get their own scorecard that they can prepare to other buildings, so that it is a direct value. So there are two different paths to discuss that we had talked about last time. One is a voluntary program. There is one existing called BE 305, which is run by the county. Miami Beach has 12 participating buildings. So we could provide additional funding to include more energy and water audits for our own buildings that participate. 5600 Collins is one that actually was already selected to do an energy and water audit on and had a really good experience with that program. We had spoken with that property manager directly. Something else could be an actual energy benchmarking ordinance that would be phased in over time. We did hear last time there was concerns about fines and not wanting to penalize buildings, so we understand that. And actually, the first 1 to 2 years would be could be a phase-in with a lot of outreach and support and education, with no fines the first couple of years. But it would be important to have the ordinance mandatory. Otherwise, it doesn't really make too much sense to have one and to have some reason for people to have to do it. So there'd be virtual workshops and technical assistance, which would be important. And overall in your memo, there's a lot of details, but there's about 872 buildings in Miami Beach that are over 20,000 square feet. And that would equate to about 57% of all of our buildings, the square feet. And reducing greenhouse gas emissions on average per year would equal about 62 acres of forests annually in our country. So there's a direct tie to the greenhouse gas reductions and the savings there. In terms of the program needs, we would have to have a software and we would have to go through competitive procurement. However, it would be smart to use the same software that City of Miami does and that Miami-Dade County is exploring, so that building managers across county and city lines can be utilizing the same product. So there was some costs there that we put in the memo. It's about $216,000 the first year and then $125,000 every year after. This program would need a position. This is a pretty large program that would need an extensive amount of management. And some cities have actually done a nominal fee of $125 to help cover some of the annual software costs. That's something some cities have done. So just wanted to bring forward this additional information. We have a draft ordinance attached. There's clearly more work to be done, but looking forward to your feedback.
Okay, Commissioner Dominguez, this is your item. Tell us the direction you'd like to go in.
Are there any grant opportunities for some of those funds?
Not at this time, and when we can continue to look, we would definitely partner closely with the Department of Energy in order to offer a lot of training, so I think it would enhance the programs, but to directly fund a software or a position at this time to do this, we haven't found anything yet.
Okay, so what I would like to do, if it's the will of the body, I know that there's still some more work to do on this, but there are some costs, is to send it back to the full commission so that we can refer it to finance to see if there is a place for a program like this so that we can expand it.
So are we referring the voluntary program, or which, explain to me a little bit more specifically the spirit of your motion?
The cost of, the added cost of software, like the 200,000 and things, because we would need to find it from somewhere. So I'd like for it to be included in future discussions at the budget workshop to see if we can make this work.
Okay, and the intent is to help property owners be more mindful on their emissions and their consumption of energy, and hopefully get them to be, by being more aware, more conservative in the way that they go about their usage.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair, and it's
And
a very
help
good
them,
point.
and help them adapt, ultimately, I guess, adapt their properties to
It's-
be more energy efficient.
Yeah, it's really that old concept of you can't, manage what you don't measure, and so it provides information at hand, it provides tips and information. And so there's a couple things that, this focuses very much on energy, but others also include water. It just wasn't part of the original referral item. And then it is important to talk about a position because this is a large program to run. So it would need someone really dedicated to do this properly and to be there for all of the building managers as well.
All right, and what resonates to me is that there are other jurisdictions already doing this. The city of Orlando is doing this. The city of Miami is doing this. Miami-Dade County is doing this. And it seems to me that the approach that's being taken, that it would apply to buildings over 20,000 square feet, is consistent to what the county is doing. So we're not taking any more onerous approach.
Correct, and just to clarify, that's what the city of Miami is doing right now, the over 20,000. And Miami-Dade County is still developing their ordinance. They have the voluntary program right now, but they are very positive that they're moving forward with an ordinance countywide.
And the county-wide ordinance is voluntary, or?
It would likely be required, and they've been working with the county attorney's office on that. It would be required because they already have a voluntary program called BE 305.
Okay, all right, and Commissioner Dominguez, your proposal would be for us not to move forward with the voluntary, but with the actual benchmark.
Well, if I understood correctly, the voluntary has costs as well, and we already have 12 participants in the voluntary. In order to make this work, we need to expand it, and that's where the costs come in.
Okay, Commissioner Bott, any comments on this item?
No, I'm okay with going straight to the mandatory for the
Yeah,
buildings of a certain size.
we either, as you say, we either rip off the Band-Aid or else we'll never do it. So I think by acclamation, can we show this as adopted? All right, thank you. Congratulations, Commissioner
All right, thank
Dominguez. All right, with that, our colleague, Commissioner Suarez, has item number 9, which I think is common sense. It could be very straightforward. So, Mr. Director, we could call up item number 9.
Sure. Item number 9 is discuss authorizing limited directional signage on Lincoln Road subject to strict size and design criteria to inform pedestrians on Lincoln Road regarding retail and restaurant businesses located on side streets in order to promote economic development and business retention in parts of Lincoln Road Retail District that receive less pedestrian traffic.
Okay, Commissioner Suarez, you're recognized to speak on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this all started when I took my family to the legendary Milkshake Bar that's on right off of Lincoln Road, and a great place, great milkshakes if you haven't had any. They were telling me the struggles that they had with walk-in business, and in particular during, I think, one of the arts and crafts Sundays that they have, one of the vendors allowed them to put their sign, which is like not an A-frame, it's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. It's like a T-frame, like an upside-down T-frame, right next to their stand, and they got a flood of business. And they said, you know, the amount of business that they got just because people knew that they're there was night and day. And so I explored this option. I even went to the Lincoln Bid meeting. I discussed this. It had unanimous approval. And so the idea is basically for any side street business on Lincoln Road, we would allow, depending on how many they have or how many business, there would only be one sign, and that would rotate every week. So if there's two businesses, one business would have it for 1 week, and the next would have for the next week. If there's three businesses, there'd be, you know, week one is business one or A, week two would be business B, week three B, and it would rotate. And so the idea here is to really help the struggling stores that are off of Lincoln Road, because the pedestrian traffic, I mean, Lincoln Road just relies on pedestrian traffic, and a lot of these stores, people don't even know where they are. I mean, that Port Tacombe place, the taco place, yeah, no one knew it existed, and it's very sad. And so look, the legendary Milkshake Bar, they're struggling. I've been talking to the owner and the GM there, and you know, I'm hoping to get this, get some relief for them.
I second the item.
Can we do this, could I suggest perhaps we propose this as, let's say a 4-month pilot, so we can, you know, at the end of the 4-month, we can see, you know, how we could improve it, continue it, to see, you know, do we like the style, the signs, the look of the signs? Would you be open to that?
Yeah, and I think the way Tom wrote it is that it's administratively approved, right? There would be a standard, and how about we do 6 months? Yeah, I think 4 months is a little too short, but and then on the 5th month, they'll come back to this committee, and then we'll review.
Yeah, so let's say November, you know, perhaps we could have this come back in November, but in the meantime, we can send a favorable recommendation to the commission. Yes.
It should be 6 months from when it gets approved at commission.
Right.
Not 6 months from today.
Yes.
I just want to try and get it through like December, so we see, you know, kind of slow months versus season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sooner the better for these businesses.
Yeah, with that, and I'm just trying to see, since we already did Collins Canal, I think we can leave the Indian Creek Waterway, Pride Park, the Creative Solutions for Live Local, we can leave that for next month. Since Amy is still here, could we quickly take up the mayor's item number 18 on composting?
Okay, item number 18 is discussion regarding recommendations for a potential composting program.
Amy, you're recognized to present on this item.
Okay, great. Good evening again. So this is another item that we had discussed back in March, and it was the mayor's sponsored item to really look at composting at City Hall, expanding things like curbside composting, and our team did a lot of research. Just to note, there is a regulatory environment where we don't have any authorized composting vendors in Miami-Dade County. So it is something that we have to think of carefully and do this within regulatory boundaries. So we did come up with a few ideas that would complement our current flagship community composting hubs that we currently have. So just as a reminder, we have North Beach and we have the Botanical Gardens. And we have a third one in Mid Beach at 40th and Chase that we're currently developing in the middle of the parking lot there. So we will have 3. So in the memo, it is a bit of a book report. There's a lot of information, but we have 3 main options. One would be for residents, and this is where staff could work with vendors to see if we could provide a discount for homeowners or offer a rebate of about $100 to have in-home composting, but they're kind of dehydrator type systems. And we thought to kickstart it, we could maybe offer 20 free to generate excitement, and then perhaps $100 per rebate after that, up to 200 units. There are some different items on the market. We did some good market research. It would have to be competitively procured, but that could be an exciting way to engage homeowners, and it could be an estimated cost of about $35,000. For option 2, which is City Hall, equipment can be purchased and deployed around City Hall to encourage composting and familiarity with the process. It could have an estimated cost of about $19,000 for 5 small scale equipment, and we could kind of go up from there, but this would help us test the product and have no additional staff costs. We did have a challenge with just creating compost sites here because we really don't have the space and it requires staff, and we have to, really keep things very sanitary and not smelling. So having that equipment that would dehydrate it on site would really help and provide a way for us to participate. And then the third option, which we're kind of excited about, is expanding to our youth and recreation centers. And this is where a great location, because we have families, we can provide education. And again, the city could utilize that same small and medium scale equipment and drop off locations inside with a lot of education. And it's a way that people could bring it. And again, we would start small and then we could begin to scale up. So very, very small case could be about 28,000 and we could go up from there. If we had a medium scale, the larger equipment at each site, it could be up to 289,000. So there are a lot of different, I think, options. And we were looking at Scott Rakow, the Flamingo Pal Gym, and the North Shore Youth Center. So just providing these options for you for your review and consideration.
And I think all these options are great, and I think certainly that expanding this for residents, and if we could offer the discount to residents, it could be perhaps the greatest impact of this product. I think limiting this only a program in City Hall or at our recreational centers truly just limits the potential of what we could be doing with this. So with that, I welcome the feedback of our colleagues.
I also love the idea of doing it at youth centers. I mean, I specialized in youth marketing for a long time before I moved down here, and any kind of sort of systemic change that you want to introduce in a family, you can do it more efficiently by starting with the kids and getting them on board. And so I think there's a great way to really effectuate long-term thinking change by getting kids and families involved. So I would actually like to proceed 2 ways and incorporate the youth centers. I think that could be great.
So there were 3 options. There were the residential component of it, which I think we should certainly be expanding on the residential aspect of it. But you're saying doing City Hall also and the youth.
I'm saying not so much City Hall.
Not so much City Hall,
But
doing
the
the
youth
resident and the youth centers. Okay, is that a motion?
Sure.
All right.
Second.
All right, and by acclamation, we're gonna show this adopted? Yep, okay. Colleagues, before we leave, Nick Kalergis, just because we are going at such a great pace, we're gonna defer to next month. Item number 10 on incentives for educational uses. Item number 13 on the floating walkways and the acquisition of the outlots for Indian Creek. Item number 14 for the classification of Pride Park. Item number 15 for creative development proposals as an alternative to invoking the preemptions of Live Local, and the potential requirements for commercial charter operators to provide sanitation pump out. So we're gonna defer those items. We just took care of item number 18. The last item that we can take care of is item number 19 that our city attorney, Nick Kalergis, is still on the line for. And Nick, we have previously discussed this item, and you were going to provide us with an update on SB 280, and clearly the governor hasn't signed the bill into law yet, but you were going to provide us with an update on the impact that this bill could potentially have for us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to do that. So just very briefly, this bill, I'll start by telling you what it does not do, which the bill does not impact where short-term rentals are currently prohibited in our land development regulations. That remains as is. However, the bill does preempt the city as to the licensing and registration of vacation rentals pretty significantly. And it preempts us as to our requirements on vacation rental platforms altogether. So with regard to individual vacation rentals, we would be sharply limited in what we can require of property owners. Basically, that they provide us, contact information for a responsible person to respond to complaints. We can continue to require a BTR and a resort tax certificate, but in many regards we would be limited. The one that I want to highlight for you is on occupancy. Right now, the city code establishes a maximum occupancy for short-term rentals of 2 persons per bedroom, and we exclude children under 2. The Senate Bill 280 allows 2 persons per bedroom plus an additional an additional person if the room is larger. So for if the room has more than 50 square feet per person, then an additional individual is allowed, and also 2 persons are allowed in common areas. So this would increase the maximum occupancy for short-term rentals. Now, the bill passed in both houses, but it has not been transmitted to the governor. So I suppose there is the chance that the governor may veto it.
And when we say on common areas, is it based on a formula that is going to allow occupants based on a certain amount of square footage? So it's a person per certain amount of square feet, or does it establish any sort of cap on the common areas for occupancy?
For the common areas, it's just an additional 2 persons. For a bedroom, more than 2 are allowable if there are at least 50 square feet per person.
Got it. And it'll completely preempt our abilities to regulate the platforms. So like, for example, in the past, we had penalties on platforms, and we required platforms to abide by certain regulations or to publish certain information on units. Is that what it's preempting us on?
Yes. So under the bill, the platform would be required to display a vacation rental license number, and if applicable, a local registration number, which we have. But beyond that, we couldn't enforce our requirements on platforms.
But the issue with that is that by preempting us, if a platform violates that, we can no longer fine the platform, and that is now preempted to the state. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so I think this is one of those bills that we just hope that the governor does not sign, and we need to keep on ensuring that those incentives that we have in place, like, for example, the average unit size incentive that we use, that we continue leveraging those for the good of the public in the face of the preemptions that we face on short-term rentals. Nick, anything else on this item that we should be aware of?
No, I hit the main points.
Thank you. With that, I think we have concluded our business for today. Mr.
Item 24, you want to defer that to July as well?
Item 24 is which item?
The potential rezoning of MXE and North Beach on Ocean Terrace?
Yes, let's defer that
Okay.
to the next meeting, and this item that we just heard, we can close this item out.
Okay.
Colleagues, before we conclude, I would like to propose that we start our meetings starting next month at 3 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. That way, I like to keep the meetings a little bit later in the day for members of the public that may work, that would like to engage in our meetings. I like to keep the afternoon hours. But is that okay with the public, with the committee?
It's fine with me.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, update the invites in case I have any conflicts. on
Yes,
it.
we'll ask staff to update those.
Yes, I'll have Jessica update all the invites. So moving forward, the meetings will start at 3 o'clock.
At 3 o'clock. And any other matters that we need to address for the good of the order? No? All right, with that, we can stand adjourned. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
All right, we got-